School Board is being conducted in person. This work session can be monitored electronically by streaming online from the district website, and an archived recording will also be available on the district website. The purpose of the school board work sessions is to build trust and teamwork, to exchange information, and when applicable, to provide direction in order to facilitate efficient and effective decision-making at regular school board meetings. The outcome of today's work session, our board members will receive updates of the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance and District Communication Plan, and receive information on referendum planning, proposed resolution, and communication plan. And the board calendar will also be reviewed. To acknowledge attendance this evening, I'll ask that board members please state their names, starting with...
I am Heather Douglas, School Board Director.
Thomas Brooks, School Board Director.
Jackie Mosqueda Jones.
Tanya Simons, School Board Director.
Dr. Tamara Grady.
And myself, Kelsey Dawson-Walton. I will now ask Superintendent McIntyre to facilitate this evening's work session.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair Dawson-Walton. Good evening, board members. I also want to welcome our guests in the audience, including our Osseo area school staff. Some others will be joining us shortly as part of our presentations this evening. We appreciate their time and contributions to the work this evening. I know they've all worked really hard in preparation. So tonight we have 4 agenda items scheduled. And first, we're going to hear from Rebecca Gilgan, the Executive Director of the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth, who will provide us an update on the BBA and some of the changes and things they've been taking on, and how does the work of the BBA connect with our strategic priorities, our strategic plan, and how does our partnership advance our work in ISD 279. We'll also take about 30 minutes to have Kte Pathways and her communications team update us on the communications plan for the district. Really giving you a chance to share with you the formalized plan and some of the research that they've reviewed to help create that plan, including a third-party communication assessment that analyzed their work. Then from there, we'll also move on to some initial information about referendum planning. So as you heard the results of the residential survey last month, we have Kte Pathways and Anthony Paternos joining me, along with Shelby McQuay from Elders is here with us tonight, regarding the planning for that 10-year operating and technology levies that provide operating funds to support programming and maintain services, along with the capital funding for technology, which are due to expire after the 23-24 school year. And then lastly, time permitting, we will review our board agenda, or our one-year board calendar looking forward. So with that, to get us started, with our first item, I'll have Kay assist, and we'll welcome up Rebecca Gilgan, again, Executive Director of the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance, to give us an update. So thank you, Rebecca, for being here.
No walk-up music?
Yeah,
Good evening. It's really great to be here with you all. It has been a minute since I've had a chance to be with the school board, and so I'm really grateful to be here tonight. Just sitting and thinking about this presentation a little bit, I'm here to share a few of the progress that has been made over the last year, as well as our priorities for the next year at the BBA. But the BBA, essentially, what young people and families need right now, it's tremendous. And so I humbly present tonight what we do as one small part of a much bigger picture and community of the work that's happening, and really as a strategic partner to the district to accelerate 2 key priorities: youth engagement and equity in our community. To begin, just a little bit of context for everyone. The Alliance is a unique organization. Can y'all hear me okay? I've got my teacher and or coach voice on, whichever you prefer. But our mission, we're not a nonprofit, we are intergovernmental, we're joint powers. So we are formed by 9 joint powers partners. Osseo is 1. The 3 other school districts that serve the 2 cities of Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. So that's Anoka-Hennepin, Robbinsdale, Brooklyn Center Community Schools, our 2 community colleges, North Hennepin, Hennepin Technical College, Hennepin County, and of course our 2 cities. So those 9 public entities came together to build an organization that would advance positive youth development and community. Our mission is not to provide direct programming to everyone. That is what a lot of the work our partners do. Our primary mission is to coordinate a system of high quality, accessible, and fully resourced programs that help young people graduate, find that pathway to college and career, and to make sure they're safe and well. So every year, partners come together, set priorities, and we build a shared strategic plan together. That's our regular work. And so our initiatives change from year to year. but we have 5 kind of guideposts for our work. Number 1, we expand youth engagement, and this means young people at the beginning of the work, helping us identify what the problems are, building the solutions, implementing the solutions. That's what youth engagement means to us. Number 2, increasing equitable access to opportunities. Number 3, maximizing the use of both public and private resources, bringing those resources together to build new things, do new things, take new action. 4, increasing the quality of existing opportunities. And 5, increasing coordination to maximize impact. Now, coordination does not seem like a super sexy word, but it is bringing people together to do things together in partnership with young people. And as we've been hearing from our partners, has been an essential service that we've provided over the last couple of years during the difficult times through the pandemic. I'm here to celebrate a major transition in our organization. Number 1, I want to kick off a change to our joint powers. This is tremendous. Our board, over the last year, as we began to build and expand our youth engagement work, our board said, you know what, we need to have young people here on this table. Young people who have come up and through our rec centers, our schools, to help us inform the decision making that we do on this board. So we spent a year building consensus amongst our board, as well as working with the legal team to figure out how, within the state statutes that define joint powers, that we can add youth directors to our board. So this is very exciting. At the end of right in February, we've got everybody signed on, and we are now added 4 youth directors. This is where we all clap. Yay! 4 young people, aged 18 to 24. And I just want to highlight an Osseo High School graduate, Bashir Korma, who graduated, I think, in 2015. He is a new director on our board. Outstanding young man who began his service with the Brooklands Youth Council in his high school experience and had gone on to serve in the Peace Corps and now is back living in Brooklands Center. Really embodies the kind of leadership that we seek to put on our board to help inform our work. We also transitioned our college partners from joint powers ex officio members to voting members. This further strengthens our work and focus on what we call our pathways to and through college. And so we're really excited about both of these transitions, and this new joint powers will shape our work through 2022 to 2026. Okay. Progress in 2021, and just saying 2021 is like, don't we all feel that? Like, oh yeah, that happened. 2020, and then like remember 2020? No, because we all blocked it out. But, you know, when our team was preparing our annual report, we were just like, many of our partners reflected back to us, we can't believe you guys got so much done. And I said, did we do anything? It just felt like there was just a flurry of need in the community. And what we spent 2021 doing was beginning with responding to the needs of youth. We built a new action plan for the year that was a temporary placeholder on what young people needed right now. Number 1 was to be re-engaged in life, in their community. Civil unrest, the pandemic, there was a disconnect, and young people wanted to be a part of what was happening in their community. We launched the Youth on Board initiative. This is a very powerful program, actually developed in Northfield, Minnesota, and is now being piloted in St. Paul, in Minneapolis, and the Brooklands. And it's really simple. We identify young people, 14 to 24, who want to have an impact on their community, who have barriers to participation, and we want to prepare them to sit at the table where the decisions are being made about their lives. So there's 2 parts to this: identifying and training young people, and identifying decision-making tables where those young people will participate. Our board was one of the first tables to participate in Youth on Board, and we've since, and I'll confirm, there we go, 7 leadership tables signed up last year. Our city commissions, our human rights commissions, arts commissions, there's a whole list of them that are actively wanting to have this youth voice as a part of their work. And so we've trained young people. Most of our young people are now high school students, which now we've got a connection point to make with more advisories and committees and task force that our school districts might be offering, where we can connect and prepare those youth with those tables. In addition, we also expanded our youth engagement. We hired 34 young people to do research, marketing, organizing, and governance projects at the BBA. We saw our own organization as a critical tool and for providing opportunity for young people to get activated last year. Another key success last year was expanding equitable access, really opportunities for each young person. We have worked with our partners for many years, working at the program level, seeing how important improving program quality is. And we've seen some programs struggle to really improve equitable access at the program level because they are oftentimes maybe in departments where broader policies may be blocking the ability to implement equity strategies at the program level. So last year, our partners said to us at Brooklyn Park Recreation and at Hennepin Tech, they said, hey, help us address some of these challenges in our programs. So we implemented a continuous quality improvement and an equity assessment at Brooklyn Park Youth Services and Recreation. And I want to just say for all of our alliance partners, when we dive in together, there is a level of vulnerability and honesty and deep work that happens with our partners that we so appreciate. And the progress made in year after year with these initiatives is really tremendous. The second was a year-long engagement with Hennepin Tech Student Affairs. As you know, college kind of has two buckets of service, what happens in the classroom and then all the other services that the college provides that helps students progress. Some of you may be aware of the research we did in partnership with North Hennepin and Hennepin Tech in 2019, the Stop, Drop, and Roll study, which looked at why students weren't persisting. And persisting means making it from their first year to their second year. In that study, we found 40% of students were not progressing, and the college has lost $6.8 million each year from students dropping out. Why? There's about 20 different reasons why, but many of those reasons come back to process improvement issues that were as well as building culturally responsive customer service and classrooms, and a whole host of other things. But since we've been working on this, we call it the blueprint for persistence, we've had a 4% increase in persistence at Hennepin Technical College. And if Jess Lordison were here today from the college, she would say, there hasn't been progress in persistence ever. It keeps getting worse, and so this is the first time they've really been able to reduce, set those numbers in a new direction. We've also leveraged resources. One of the major initiatives that at the beginning of the pandemic that we kicked off, really in partnership with our cities, who, as you know, do not have a public health department, really sought to respond differently to what was happening in community. In the BBA, we are not a public health agency, but a coordinating body, and we assisted our cities in building a new response. We helped them build health on the go. The cities bought mobile trailers, we connected them to public health, to key leaders in in health equity and community, ACER, and the Health Resource Center from Brooklyn Center Community Schools. And we built new ways for the cities to deliver public health programs and resources. In leveraging these, we also transitioned this. So now our cities, we don't operate this program, our two cities, one Brooklyn Center and both Brooklyn Park, both operate their own Health on the Go initiatives at this time. I want to just be mindful of time, and I'll just say, one more piece there. When Dante Wright, we partner closely with the city partners in Brooklyn Center, and when Dante Wright was killed April 11th of 2021, the community was sent into a spiral. And our school district partners were receiving an influx of cash funds to really help support youth and families. And the school district, in receiving these funds, realized that they were not legally able to give this money directly to youth and families. So they asked us to help broker a partner, a 501c3 partner with Youth Prize, and I just would love to give a shout out to Youth Prize because they helped facilitate the distribution of $200,000 directly to families in Brooklyn Center who were impacted by the civil unrest after the killing of Dante Wright. This is, just an example of how we make sure that we are responding to what's happening in our community and trying to respond to the needs of partners as well. In coordination and collaboration, I just want to call out this number 2 item here, Youth Council. We really see this opportunity to come together and take action on what some of our youth leaders in our council are working on right now. We all know that getting to college, what high school students need, college prep, we all have very rigorous ideas about what that is. Our project here is about stepping back and having young people reflect with each other. What is it that you need? How did you get it? Where am I getting it? How could we help each other here? And so really taking a youth-centered design, as we say, and as they'll be developing, to really figure out kind of what are some of the solutions that we can implement for young people to help better prepare them for college. And so we'll be looking to come together and take action based on what young people in the Youth Council develop. So in 2022, our priorities, and you'll really hear me really clearly as our partner and our board. We've just approved our priorities in February is really stay the course. So I want to kind of jump into priority number one, and I've kind of talked about a couple of these, but number one, I'll talk about grow youth on board. We see Osseo School District as a priority partner, our 4 school districts. You serve lots of kids in the Brooklands. We want to identify all of the advisories and committees where you want young people's voice to be strong. We want to recruit those tables to be a part of our program, and we want to recruit Osseo students to be a part of our program. So we are really looking forward to deep partnership and engagement on this over the next year. We also are really excited over this next year to implement. We are hiring 10 Brooklink internships. Brooklink is a program and initiative, the youth employment program operated by both cities, Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. And we are launching kind of 2 key youth-led projects. One is the Youth 2 survey. It's a biennial survey that we do. We train young people to be researchers, to go out and understand the needs of youth and aspirations of youth and community. And then we use that information to inform our strategic planning process. The second is a partnership with the City of Brooklyn Park and their youth violence prevention strategy around an anti-hate campaign. And what I can say about that particular campaign is it's dovetailing the county's investment in their anti-hate initiatives at the county. But this will really be a local effort, young people coming together and identifying what does hate look like in our community, and what, more importantly, is the counter message that we want to create. We could say it's love and unity, but I don't know what it's going to be. Young people will develop what those messages are, and of course make sure that young people and families know when and how to report crime, hate incidences, and hate crime in community. I'll skip to the next slide here. Priority number 2 around responding to the needs of youth in the community. One of the, as I said before, the work we're doing, youth mental health is an enormous challenge in our community. And right at this particular moment, we are clear that what is needed, the response needed, is pretty massive and outside the scope of what resources we do have. We are listening to our youth council as they develop initial pilots and concepts, and also to our alliance partners who are telling us, many of our schools, y'all have invested quite a bit in providing students additional mental health supports, and our city partners as well. And so we're trying to understand what is really the collective opportunity that we might have as we're seeing the results of these initial ARP, ESSER, and HRSS investments in mental health. Kind of how is that going, right? And what in addition to that might be needed? And more importantly, what do we need to sustain once those resources are gone, and where will young people be? So we'll learn more from young people this summer in our Youth 2 survey about what those needs are. Priority 3, with the beautiful expansion of our board, which is a heck of a good time to go from 11 board members to 17. Let's clap for that, board management. Yeah, go Becca. Okay, so I'm really excited about that, and we're going to do some team building, right, and bring together and get to know each other and spend some time in relationship together, because we all have a shared purpose on our board, and that is to support young people. That's an exciting part about our work. So we are activating 2 board committees this year at the BBA. There's 2 essential policies that we're going to pass. Number 1 is our equity policy. We're working deeply on the community engagement related to that right now, which really this equity policy will shape and determine the scope of the work we will do in this area. We have quite a bit of work we're doing now. This policy will help determine in the next iteration of our strategic plan what that body of work will look like, feel like, and be experienced by young people in our community. Lastly, it's always a priority. I think I put it up there every time because the most important thing I think we do at the BBA is gather the youth and community-centered data, information, the relationships, that helps us understand both what is needed, what the aspirations are, and what's feasible and doable across our system. But we will gather those informations, or that information, to really help shape our decision making and leverage research, which sounds really jargony, right? But like, be smart, do good things, and make really good use of the public resources that we have, because we know when we've come together in the past, like when we launched Brooklink in 2015, that was an excellent way for the public sector to come together. And now, because we built that program, what we see, right, as our cities now leverage about $500,000 of state and federal funds to support youth employment in our community. So that's a smart kind of investment that we're always looking to make. I think oh yeah, my favorite slide. Okay, so benefits to your students. Number one, authentic opportunities to lead, both in partnership with you all and also with our cities, right? Right now, the Human Rights Commission at the City of Brooklyn Park is looking for students 18 to 24. I'd like to get access to all of your alumni to invite them to participate. They've come up through this community. The city needs their view and voice on that particular commission and other commissions as well, Park Hrc and many other. And so there's opportunity with Youth on Board, but also with our Youth Council to participate in the work at the BBA. And we want to continue to grow that. Second, I think, it might seem like a one-off, but to me it's exactly why the BBA was created, was that students at Brooklyn Junior or students at Northview, that when they go outside the school and they walk across to Zanewood Recreation Center, that what their experience is at Zanewood is amazing. And they get connected, and if they're struggling, that they're connected to a really great youth worker who can help them get the resources that they need. And so when we dive in with the Youth Services Department and we're doing process improvement and program development, that's exactly our intention, is to make sure that when young people move between our city recreation programs or our college campuses and the high schools in our community, that they have a great experience, they get what they need, and they stay connected, most importantly, to the resources and people that can help them get to where they want to be. Lastly, here to our scholars and families, or to families in the district, I think we've seen really, as we've been listening to parents over the last couple of years, is that life is crazy and intense, and our programs are changing, their lives are changing, things happen overnight. And oftentimes their connection to what's happening in community education or what's happening at the city or what's this event, they're missing these things that are happening like this. And so really we've invested in both direct face-to-face outreach, but also expanded online outreach. And so this is really digging into the direct messaging to families and parents and saying, hey, here, connect with us in this online space, and we'll just keep feeding to the different opportunities that are coming. And we hope to connect and catch parents just in time for when they need summer camps, because summer's just around the corner, or summer jobs, right? So these are the kinds of things that we're really trying to expand access by getting information into the hands of youth and families just in time. Okay, so with that, I think just in closing, a couple highlights. We're really excited to grow our partnership around Youth on Board. And also just to continue to include both students and staff around the development of our equity approach and our strategic plan. When we build our strategic plan, I'm not sure folks, if y'all were there, we do really big, broad community engagement sessions around our strategic planning, and we will look to include everybody this winter when we start our broad community engagement around our strategic plan. And lastly, we hope to do what we've been doing, right, is really to be a strategic partner to you all as you seek to advance your new strategic plan and our shared goals. So I will I'll leave it up to you. I have some questions. I was like, Corey, can I ask these questions? And she's like, just keep it simple, Becca. Just, are there any questions? I'd be happy to take those. And thank you so much for letting me share this info with you tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. I mean, I think, when we talked about, having Brooklyn Bridge, you come here and talk to us, why I think it's so important is we've been spending the last, well, like you said, 2021 was, woof, but we were really focused also on our strategic plan, so really looking inward. And I think because one of the things that continues to come up on our board is how we engage our community, how we are ensuring that our youth and our scholars are, part of kind of any problem solving or successes, and that we're really incorporating that work. So it's good for us as a board together, and I know Tanya right now sits on BBA on behalf of our board. I think it's just important for all of us to hear the vision, because a lot of things you're talking about is stuff that I know we strongly support in our work, and I think to hear from our partners kind of from the outside in where those connections are coming from. So right now, what I'll do is open it up if anybody has any questions or comments for Becca.
Can I jump in for a minute, Rebecca? So when I heard you talking about youth on board, and that it started out of Northfield, my daughter was in charge of that youth on board
What?
in Northfield. And so,
So
she was
tell me
the,
she had a good time.
she hated leaving there. She was a promised fellow and then renewed. And
crazy.
then they didn't have a position for her, so, and she's getting her master's in public health, but, just
That is funny.
being in that space of her talking about the agency that the youth had and the ability for them to work, just the things that they did, I kept saying, why don't we do that everywhere? Like, why are we not doing that everywhere? And I kept conceptualizing, how do we do it here in the Twin Cities? Because there's so many resources. And I can't even tell you how excited I am when you started, because I haven't been to any of your meetings and I didn't know what was going on. So I'll be waking my daughter up when I get home, because she is living with me while she gets her master's, and saying, you wouldn't believe this. So you might be hearing from me.
Yeah.
But I'm super excited about it.
We are excited to have champions like yourself, and I'd love to actually connect with your daughter about her experience on this too, as we've been developing that. And, I'll say this about, we learned from Northfield, who kind of piloted this, and Zach with the Healthy Communities Initiative out there, I just want to give a shout out to them, because he let us steal all the good ideas.
She was there before Zach, FYI.
Before Zach, so it was your ideas. Your
kidding.
daughter is all your, anyway.
Just teasing.
But I think what's really exciting is that we find ourselves in a time right now where young people, they need a pathway to bring their voice in the change that they want in community. And we will miss a critical opportunity if we don't create those tables, if we don't create those spaces, to really bring inside of our organizations that power and that energy to partner with young people, to really make the changes that we all want to make things better in our community. So we're grateful to Northfield, and also to both Sprockets in St. Paul and the Youth Coordinating Board in Minneapolis, and to Youth Prize that's coordinating this regional effort and helping us do fundraising to support the work. So it's a bunch of magic, and so, but now I need tables. I need tables for young people, and so look forward to connecting with all of your high schools, because I know they've got tables, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So actually, on that line, a lot of our advisory committees do actually have space for students. We just don't, I guess, engage them in a way that allows them to commit
Yep.
or desire participating.
Yep.
And sometimes, I know when I first started on our DPAC committee, we did have a couple of kids, maybe 2 or 3 tops, but they kind of disengage at a certain point.
Yep.
And so I think that it's really important that we lean on that expertise
Yep.
in how do we keep them engaged and help facilitate
Yep.
the, I guess, procuring of students who want to do these things
Yep.
versus, I feel like a lot of times it's ended up mostly being kids whose like parents were doing it.
Right.
And so they're kind of
Yep.
get dragged along. And so I think getting kids involved that have a desire for this type of work
Yep.
is so important. So I would just say that, I'm pretty sure that we can probably connect on that and making sure
Yep.
that we can really, because that's something we want too. We talk about it all the time.
Yep.
But I also, there was something in here, I think it was like the 4th or 5th slide, the expanded equitable access, where you talked about the 4% increase for the stop, drop, and roll, which is cute. I like that. That's actually really incredible to have that increase after having such significant decreases year after year after
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Particularly, I feel like in this time period, where there's been a lot of difficult things at Hennepin Tech right now.
Right.
And so I think, that's really, really important. And I think it shows to the students who might be going there that we are addressing these issues. When things come up, we are going to handle them, particularly with the student affairs and how they're affected by some of the stuff that's happened there within the last couple of years. So I really like that. And then the other thing that I wanted to comment on was, Oh, just overall, I just noticed a lot of like planning. There's a lot of planning happening here, right? Like we're engaging, we're leaning into these things. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing the outcomes,
Yeah.
right? As
Yeah.
this work
Yeah.
flourishes and
Yeah.
continues to grow. I feel like this is, it's still a pretty new program, despite, particularly with the basically year and a half, 2 years where
Yeah.
things had to be operating quite a bit differently. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing what will come out of it. And that's one thing I feel like we've talked about as a board a lot is how do we better engage, as Director Dawson Walton was talking about. That's honestly, I feel like that topic comes up at every single meeting. Basically, we
Yeah.
talk about engagement. It's rare if it doesn't. So, continuing to build that relationship is so important in how we get our kids to join in, to participate in that, and not just feel it. When I saw that there was a survey or whatever, the first thing that I kind of thought of was, do they want to do another survey? We do so many surveys, but it's also such important information that we get from the surveys usually. So I did have actually a question about that. How are those questions formed? Like, is it done in-house? Is it out-house? Like, how does it happen?
The word outhouse just got
Sorry.
my brain a little off.
Out of the house.
but Not there.
Yeah.
So one of I would say like the fundamental principles we have at the BBA around engagement, right, is that we center and include those most impacted. So that's why we hire young people and train them to be researchers. So young people begin, like the last Youth survey in 2020, they began with a focus group of themselves saying, what are the issues that we're facing? Then they took that to a broader set, we call this grounded theory, a broader set of young people and said, what are you experiencing? And from that, they developed a survey that was then done community-wide with a statistically significant sample of young people. And I think it went out through we were right in the middle of distance learning at that time, and it went out through the school district's platform for youth to participate. And so I think we had over 700 kids take this survey. And then that data comes back, and the young people do the analysis and the meaning making of that data. And then we determine, okay, what are we saying are the needs, et cetera, and then we build an action plan off of that work. So that's a little bit of how our youth survey. So this next summer, when that happens again, we'll kind of do a similar process. And so I think I can't tell you what it's going to look like, but what I can tell you is that the process or the container is that we'll begin with what are the issues that are most relevant to young people right now. And sometimes those are just not where we are. It's just not where we are. It could be a whole variety of things. And then they build that out and they test, are these the issues then for the broader youth community? And then of course, which parts of the youth community? Because different groups of young people have different challenges and opportunities. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
I just think it's outstanding in the way that you establish benchmarks, that you have the results, and the way that you're being really efficient and connecting all of the resources, and just that critical role where you sit and you can see all of the different organizations and weave them together. So I think that's been my biggest learning, being on the board, is just that critical place that you sit, that nobody else does, to see across. So it's really great that everybody gets to see all of the work that's being done.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that. And really a testament for each of you that come to the board meetings and participate. The BBA works best when our members show up and share what's happening at Osseo, what's happening with your students. And I want to say thank you to Corey for participating on our executive leadership team. He's diligent. He's there for those meetings. And Brian Severson Hall, who participates on our strategy team. And other members of the Osseo school community that participate in our work. It's strengthened and as good as as them and all of our other partners that attend and participate as well. So.
Chair Dawson, well, if I could just add two things that I wanted to point out. First of all, the value that we get, Becca, when you bring us together in that executive committee, when it's our city leaders, our district leaders, representatives from the county, and the college system, that's a unique opportunity to connect on a variety of topics. I think you have a hard time getting us onto the agenda because we're always connecting on other things. So that space is really critical for the partnership and relationship building that we need to do. And I think Becca, you probably didn't give enough credit to the hard work you've done with this board. I know Director Brooks and others have, and, you know, Director Simons, I think you see it too, the last 2 years of the organizational work behind just resetting the structure of this to position it to be successful into the future. So that took a lot of technical work to look at the leadership structure and just how you're organized. And I know that's behind the scenes, but I know the time and effort that's gone into that to really position and launch our youth into really great things into the future. So I know we'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge your hard work behind the scenes with all of us, trying to really figure out how to best structure and organize and lead this new board into the futures. I think you had a lot of turnover. You know, there was just some structural things you had to change to really get some stronger results. So kudos to you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge the amount of work that goes into try to coordinate resources and make sure people, like, there are so many people really trying to do good work, and it gets lost if it's not coordinated and then directed to the people that need it. And then I love how you tie together letting the youth lead with what they need and how they want to envision their future for themselves and for students that are younger for them. We talk a lot about learning loss and mental health issues, and you talked about the drop and enroll research, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more on why we lose students, because that's important to us as a district as well as all the other entities that are really trying to fill those needs and intervene, you know, create interventions that support students so that they can be successful in life.
Thank you for that question, and if I can effectively report back to you a 90-page research paper, the highlights, I'm going to be like a rock star right now. But
You got a gold star.
and we finished that in 2019, which, as you know, anything more than 6 months ago, you can remember. But the Stop, Drop, and Enroll, as I kind of introed, really, that was an IRB-approved body of research from the Minnesota State's college system, and we went in depth doing a systemic analysis. So not just trying to understand what students' barriers were, but really what were the institutional barriers as well, right? And assets. That's the other lens that the BBA brings when we do this work. It's not just trying to find problems, but also what are the strengths and the assets that are also present in that organization and present in students, right? And so one of the things that we found, or the what's the root cause, right, of the dropping out, was just a whole host of systemic issues, policy choices, big P, small p, process challenges. Like one, for example, many students drop out, they don't enroll because there is a hold on their record. So say a student started their first year and they didn't finish one of their classes and they didn't finish paying their tuition. A hold gets put on their record. They are not eligible to even enroll. They can't sign up. They have to pay that debt, or they have to go through a process to remove a hold from the record. Now, what we found, and this is so boring, but you asked for it, there were over like 53 different reasons a student could have a hold on their record. And when students got that information, they had no idea how to remove the hold. This is a really boring thing called process improvement, right? What's the process by which a student can get back on track? Those are, and there was numerous of these throughout the college system, and I really want to give credit to our college partners for being so honest and transparent about all of these process improvement challenges that they needed to make. And so you can see they've made many, some of them are in progress. Another was really around student communications. They just simply weren't connecting between enrollment, counseling, coursework, et cetera. The communication felt like this to students, and they were getting email, and it didn't work. Both of our college partners implemented a new, what's it called, client management software, so like the system, what's it called? $5, whoever.
Student information system.
Yeah, something like that, where it's more like a managing customers software. And so now students are customers, and any information that comes in from advising and counseling, it all gets done, and the communication is coordinated, right? So they're getting text messages and they're getting pinged, the student is late on their fees, can you follow up? And it's just things like that that are these internal processes that once improved and strengthened really make it easier for students to stay on track. Another major kind of bucket, that was two, I'll say two more. One is really the college prep piece of it. Both, I mean, there are just numerous gaps in CTE offerings and programs and pathway. I mean, it's just, it's craziness, right? And how parents and young people understand PSEO and college and schools and like all the different options is bonkers, right? And then you add in there, if a parent's native language isn't English, it's nearly impossible, and it's all on the kids. And we haven't really effectively student and family designed those pathways. We've mostly institutionally designed those pathways. And so we've been working on some student-led efforts around that. That's been challenging to make policy changes around what we've been learning around college prep. And then the last bucket was really, as we mentioned here, around cultural responsiveness. Our college campuses are more diverse now than they have been ever. And yet the kind of the climate and the way services are being delivered are really designed around what the student population looked like, 30 years ago. And so changing the notions of how do we just engage across culture, right? What are our expectations? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we expect folks, faculty, staff to have at our colleges to engage people from cultures that are different than their own? And so this is just a piece of work that the colleges knew they needed to do, right? Is to help their staff and faculty build these skills to better and more effectively engage students. So that's a kind of a quick synopsis of what some of the findings were. But
No, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I appreciate you cutting through the red tape on the bureaucracy part of it, but also you have within your system the ability to support students to learn how to manage that kind of red tape, because it doesn't stop when you're trying to get into community college.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a lifelong struggle.
I think we try to do both and at the BBA. I think we lean towards changing systems and changing process. It's kind of the upstream strategy, if you will. But we also know that we need to create new strategies for young people right now, right? And so we really lean into youth-designed solutions for those. But I think we've, as I mentioned, I just think we got to get ahead of some of these things within our systems and take a deeper look at what's causing these inequities. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great, anyone else?
Yeah. So Rebecca, it's nice to see you in person. I don't think I have since serving on the board. And just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. I know that there's a lot behind the scenes that we don't get to see. Even for Director Simons, who is currently serving on the board. I guess one really quick question for those of us that aren't on the board and aren't privy to all of the work that's happening behind the scenes, what's the best way to get quarterly updates from you?
How much reading do you want to do? So we do, thank you for that question. You can sign up on our website for our newsletter updates. And so we do a community update a couple times a month, just really very brief, kind of what's moving and happening in community and where folks can jump in. But quarterly updates in terms of full briefing on what the work of the organization is are available. They're public, so folks can call and request their reports to the board, quarterly reports. Our board meets quarterly, and so then that's also available to community as well. And those are 12 pages long, full of magic. So depends on how much reading you want to do. And you can call me at any time. Or ask Corey, and then Corey can call me.
We could forward them I can forward them to the board members too.
I was just gonna suggest, maybe just adding the school board's email to the newsletter list might give us those little peaks, and then you could, or whoever the liaison is at the time, could forward it to the rest of us, the quarterly thing.
I get them, but yeah, I think if we could, it's a good idea.
Okay.
I mean, that's simple enough. I can just add the board's emails to our newsletters. And then Director Simons, I think you said you can bring the quarterly report. Great.
Forward it, yep.
Super.
Nice.
And as you get going, you'll have more reports at our meetings anyway, right? So, and your board committee reporting, yeah.
Just hand them out.
Well, thank you.
So I know it's been said already that we talk about community engagement, or parent engagement, scholar engagement all the time on the board. It comes up just about every meeting. And I think we could also do maybe a better job of internalizing and promoting the work that the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance is doing as part of our commitment to engagement with youth. While we're not necessarily doing all of the work, we are partners in this, and it is part of our strategy in connecting with youth. And you know, because of the work that I've seen our scholars able to achieve, whether through this role on the school board or even in my full-time role, I'm having an opportunity to serve with 2 youth commissioners. We've actually been having discussions lately about, you know, what does it look like for those youth commissioners to actually serve as chair or vice chair of the commission, which, you know, is a huge deal. So yeah, I do see a lot of potential here. I think one of the questions that I have for you, knowing that you do this sort of day in and day out, I think about how difficult it is to get adults engaged outside of like working hours and having to balance like family and all those other things. Have you figured out the secret sauce yet?
Yes.
And like when and where and, you know, what
Yeah.
time and what capacity, like how do we capture you?
Well, one, thank you for this great question, and it really stimulates for me how much more I'd like to understand about your community engagement practice as a district. Like, what does that look like and feel like, and kind of, do you have policy on that? We have a youth and community engagement policy that really shapes a lot of how we do. But the special sauce is about real work and shared power. So young people will show up if it's real, if it impacts them, and it's, you know, they have a chance to see adults take action on what they're saying. Let's just be honest, that doesn't happen in their lives. So when it does happen, they turn to their friends and they're like, you have to join the youth council. This is legitimate. And then my staff are amazing, and they have good snacks and games and icebreakers, because at the heart of all of this community work is relationship, right? So we have to mean something to each other, and we have to know why we're here together. So the special sauce is just a really youth-centered practice about, and for all of our board, this is true, this doesn't just count for how we engage young people, but for our board and our partners. And so, Corey, I appreciate your comments earlier, and I would just say, you know, if we've done anything well, is that we facilitate. You know, it's a lot of work, but the strength is about getting from others to understand what their passions and interests are and what they want to bring to the organization, and how do you connect those things to then move a thing forward, right? And that's at the heart of our engagement strategy, including those most impacted, real work, real power sharing, and really bringing those assets and talents together to make something new happen. But if we come into that thinking that we already know the answer of what we're going to do, or we're not going to take action, then that's not the time to do any community engagement. And so I think that's in many ways a luxury at the BBA, is that we only tend to activate projects where we can do that kind of deep engagement. So, and we're still learning on how to do this as well. I mean, nobody's perfect. So, but thank you for the question and the opportunity to talk about good snacks.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to say one thing about Youth on Board, to make sure that it's not just about attracting young people, it is also about retention. And so a key part of our work, and I want to shout out Julie Richards, who is our Youth and Community Engagement Initiative Coordinator, and Andrew Mua, who's doing our youth engagement. A big piece of this is that when the tables sign up, we ask them to assess their inclusion practices, to assess some basic things like, how does the meeting run, right? Is it engaging for adults? Because if it's not engaging for the adults, it's surely not going to be engaging for young people. And by the way, it's, you know, this is like one of these fundamental equity practices, right? When you make it work for a 15-year-old, right, and they're really engaged, every other adult is going to love that meeting way more. I've seen it a million times. And so this is a real shared shift, right? We want to prep young people, but we know we have to prep in tables too. So we want tables that are willing to think about, how do they shift the way they talk and think, the way they do decision making? Do they even know how they do decision making? Are they looking at those lenses of adultism? Like, how do they think about young people? Do they think young people have a solution here, or do they just want youth to be at the table, right, for tokenized purposes? So it's a both and. in that. And so, really critical for the success of the program.
I love that you just shared that. My daughter sent me, she's 17, she sent me a TikTok that was talking about how adults still want to play the games that teachers played, and that helps them engage, right? It was, the example was popcorn, when you were a kid and you had to read and it was popcorn, right? That adults, when you're going through a briefing, are more likely to stay engaged if you engage them in these ways. So I just love that you're sharing that perspective, that when you look at it maybe from a different lens,
Yeah.
you're able to engage everybody better.
Yeah.
It's just such a great way of thinking, because I think sometimes we get so into this mindset of professionalism, right? We use this professional language, and we have to say things a certain way, and a lot of times I think it puts people at ease and allows them to come into the space as who they
includes,
are,
yep.
when you kind of break away some of those things.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to hear that that's kind of approach you guys are taking, so thank you.
Rebecca, oh, sorry.
Okay, and I have a couple questions, and we're like way over time. So, but yes, ask your question.
And I gotta go get some tacos.
Yeah.
so.
I had
I can be
a
done.
couple more,
Go ahead.
but I don't want to get
I can be
yours
done.
either. So you talked about the Brooklyn Park HRC looking for youth commissioners.
The Human Rights Commission?
Yep.
Yep.
And then I know, like, as a liaison to the RISE committee, like,
Yep.
we would love some youth,
Yeah.
advisors there as well. I think in both of the Brooklyns, I know there's this huge, there's a lot of work happening right now, mostly with adults, whether that's at the cities, we're trying to get the school district more involved, and also the county. A lot of adults racking their brain on how to best engage youth, particularly those that are not typically involved in the system, or maybe involved in the system in ways that we don't want. And so, trying to address some of the things like the violence and the crime and
Yep.
sort of all of those things that are happening. Has there been any thought put into
A lot.
using the voices of youth to help?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I just want to say, like, too, when we think about youth, the experiences of violence in our community that young people have, we think of a broad set of promotion, prevention, and intervention approaches, right? And so the city's doing a lot of work in this area, and I really want to give a shout out to Catrice O'Neill, who's the program director for Brooklyn. They, in the middle of all this craziness, in response to a lot of the violence happening, launched a youth entrepreneurial program, and the program has exploded. They've had, young people who are really at the margins and high risk, engaged. They are being paid to build their own businesses. This is exactly the kind of positive youth development intervention strategy that we need, coupled with youth outreach, violence interrupters, and others. So there's a whole complement. I really would encourage y'all to invite the city, if you can, to kind of really see the full complement of their violence prevention strategies and youth engagement opportunities happening at the city. It's really something. Yeah. Thanks for that question. And definitely, yeah.
Gosh, what else did I want to squeeze in?
Okay, Jackie, you go on, then Tom will go back to Thomas. Or you
I'm
figure
good.
it out.
We're good. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, and then I'll go
Yeah.
back to Thomas.
I'm good.
Oh, okay, go back to Thomas. Trying to save you some time to find it.
Here, I can go. My favorite color's red. Nice, I know, okay. Okay.
Actually, Kelsey, go ahead.
Okay, I have some, thank you also. I mean, I think it's a huge accomplishment with the youth on board, and I've known Becca for a very long time. We worked together way back in the day. So I love seeing, being able to work together in this capacity as well. So a couple of the questions I have, just kind of more practical, and Thomas talked about it, but we have a RISE committee that came out of our resolution around systemic racism.
What does RISE stand for?
Radically something.
Engagement, right? The E is engagement.
Radically investing in student engagement.
What is it?
Okay,
What is it?
okay.
Corey, what?
What?
Radically investing in student
Thank
engagement.
you.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
And that really, the premise of that, it came out
Love
of
to see
the
that.
resolution around the murder of George Floyd and just around systemic racism. And one of the things that we were saying is, when we talk about engagement, really getting parents throughout the districts that have historically not had like a large presence in some of our policies and initiatives, and we're so many, and geographically diverse, racially diverse. And so I would love, like as Thomas said, I mean, to connect somehow with RISE and Brooklyn Bridge Alliance in some of the work, especially around, you know, I don't know a lot about this, I know a little bit, but one of the things that has come up in RISE is around like racism and kind of how is it reported in the system. And I know a little bit about the anti-hate campaign, so nothing to like go into detail about dive now, but I just wondering if some of the work and investment that you've been, you know, leading and coordinating, somehow RISE can just even learn a little bit more about that, so we're not, you know.
I would love that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that just when you were talking, we just all, you know, approved some recommendations for CTE pathways, new CTE pathways coming up, and I think that I remember one of my first years I served on the BBA, and I remember just the conversation with the stop drop, the research, and just that college prep is so important. So I know, I'm sure that they're, obviously with Corey being so involved, it's already connected, but just like struck me when you were talking, and I just think that, you know, as we move forward with that, just connecting that way.
May I ask a quick question about that? Is that okay? For the CTE pathways, this is new policy that the board just passed, or set a program? And were students involved in the development of those pathways? Super.
Yeah.
I'd really love to see it.
Yeah, so I think it's a
Cool.
I can get you more information. It's a lot, so.
Yeah.
For another time.
That's what I've been for.
Okay, and then something else Thomas had asked about, and I just am curious, is like, you know, we hear, of course, we talk a lot about mental health, like, I mean, everybody talks about mental health, and so when you did the survey, I'm just so curious of like, what did youth say?
Yeah, I love you for asking that question. You know, first of all, you know, we start with this, our framework around mental health is not simply the absence of mental disease or disorder. It is the presence of resiliency skills, social emotional skills, and coping skills, right? The presence of those things. And so when we ask young people, what are the things that you need to address your mental health? I will give somebody $100 at this day, if you can guess what it was. Number one thing that helped, that young people said helped them cope with mental health during the pandemic. Friends. Starts with an H.
Homes.
Hobbies. Yeah. One young person said, you know, I had forgotten how much I loved art. I used to do it all the time in middle school, but I was just so busy in high school, I lost it. But now I pulled out all my art supplies, and that's what I do all day. And it feels great. That quote always stood out in my mind.
Yeah.
But we forget hobbies are after-school programs, and they're after-school programs that are led by young people saying, hey, I'm super interested in fill in the blank, right? And so while we're busy activating crisis interventions around mental health, we are forgetting that it is a super great basketball coach, and it's a super awesome anime team, whatever, and whatever it is. Those are the people who are also helping your kids, our young people, identify those feelings early on, talk with a safe adult, et cetera. Like, we can't lose sight of those investments, and that's what we've been talking about forever at the DBA, is that when we have the presence of these positive assets in community, young people have a much better chance of making it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's great.
Thanks for asking that question.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, and my last comment, because I know that we have to get going. The other thing that I love, I know that you connected with Amy when we were developing our, scholars serving as board representatives and touch base. But one of the things I think is interesting, I love how you define young people, 14 to 24, because we do know that. That was one of the part of the conversation that we had when you have a junior or senior, here with us. There's so many competing, activities, homework, family commitment, so many things happening, and it is hard. And so it makes me kind of think, even like we're always like re-looking at what we're, how we are defining, the work and the role of our school, our scholars who are representative on the board. And just got me thinking about like even our alumni, like that maybe are around here that have just maybe a year out of
Yes.
graduating, and then have that fresh experience, but have some reflection too. Or
Yes.
so anyways,
Exactly.
I just appreciated that.
Yeah.
So I think we thank you so much
Okay,
for
jazz
being
hands.
here. Jazz hands.
Thank you
you,
so much
Rebecca.
for the invitation to be here tonight. It was lovely to see all of you
Yes.
in real life and in person, and so thanks for
Great
having me.
work. Awesome work.
Okay, I'm gonna go get a taco now.
Okay, go get a
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
I've already made the note, next time we bring Rebecca back, we'll plan for an hour.
Yeah. Hey, this is what we're all passionate about,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So clearly underestimated the time needed on that one. So we'll transition to our next team here in K's Up. I'm excited about this to show the board the work that's been done as Kay came in new as the director here to do an audit of our communications plan. And we have a lot of new team members as well. So as Kay gets set up here and started, I'm excited for you to see the communication plan, but also to be familiarized with the new members of our team. They've all hit the ground running, and there's been a lot of demands on their expertise already. So with that, Kay, I'll turn over to you. Thank you.
Superintendent McIntyre, Chair Dawson Walton, and members of the board, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our district-wide communication plan with you tonight. I'm Kay Vavella, School Community Relations Director here in Osseo. With me, I have Ashley, Megan, and Tanya, who will each take a few seconds to introduce themselves and their role here.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm one of the communication specialists. I started in November.
Good evening, I'm Tanya Bradhoft, and I'm another communications specialist, and I started July 1st, and I specialize in video production here. Nice to meet you.
Hello, I'm Megan Kimmel, and I started in January as a communications specialist.
Brand new team.
Yes, very new.
You're welcome.
Thank you. In Osseo, we've taken a strong stance on communication. Our new strategic plan has been set to help us reach our organization's mission. And one of our strategic directions as part of it is specifically on communication. It's promote inclusive participation of our communities and provide timely, relevant, and easily accessible communication. This hits at the core of what our community relations team does on a day-to-day basis. You'll see that reflected in our district-wide communication plan tonight. A solid communication plan is essential to maintaining forward movement and achieving success. It helps communication teams strategically meet goals and objectives and ensures evaluation is a key component of our work. Our full plan is included in tonight's board materials. When you take a look at this 9-page document, it may look a little overwhelming, but it's essentially organized by audience. So you'll see communication tactics and tools under each audience. The audience is highlighted in yellow at the top of each audience. So some will repeat as they're applicable to more than one group, some of those tactics. Also, communication plans aren't in stone. They're living, breathing documents that flex to what our needs are. I'd say we're a little unique in doing this. I've talked to many colleagues who want to do a district-wide communication plan, but struggle with finding the time to get it on paper. In my case, I can say this is the first district that I've ever been a part of that has had one written down. All in all, our team is proud of the work that was done to create this. A communication plan has 4 parts to it: research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. We'll talk about the research phase over the next couple of minutes here. The next 5 slides show results of the 2022 residential survey. As you review the information, keep in mind that our environment is quite different today than it was years prior. Nonetheless, it's still vital to review our progress over time. As our survey company has shared, a plus or minus 5% change is considered statistically significant. Out of residents, so those with and without families, Osceo's quality in 2012 was rated 78% if we combine the good and excellent choices, followed by 87% in 2019 and 82% in 2022. The excellent responses have gone up since 2012, but you can see that there was a shift from excellent to good this year. For parents and caregivers, 87% chose excellent or good, with more 47% specifically choosing excellent. We'll see this now and in the slides ahead that parents and caregivers respond more positively. For residents, the excellent and good combination for value has decreased a little bit. It went from 81% to 2019 to 77% this year. We also see a similar switch from excellent to good here. For parents and caregivers, the combined excellent and good percentage was 79. For both value as shared on this slide and quality as shared in the slide before, our surveying company has said that we are very strong compared to other districts at this time. Communications-wise, excellent and good rated 87% in 2019, followed by 81% this year. For parents and caregivers, this year's excellent and good responses combined to 85%, with 31% choosing excellent. Our survey company shared that this is higher than seen at other districts recently. For residents, information on our district is most often found through our website. That is followed by word of mouth, local newspapers, and the district newsletter. For parents and caregivers, email is the primary source of information by quite a bit, followed by the website, district newsletters, and calls or texts. Residents prefer to receive information through our website, followed by email, district newsletter, and word of mouth. Parents and caregivers overwhelmingly choose email, followed by district website, district newsletter, and calls or texts. It is a good sign that how residents and parents and caregivers are getting information is similar to how they would prefer to receive information. The full communication plan in your packet links to the detailed results of the 6 surveys that we took a look at. Another piece of the research that our community relations team did was a baseline assessment. This was essentially an audit conducted by a third-party group, in our case, CISO Communications. CISO talked with some new and previous community relations team members, as well as a publication supervisor and the recruitment and retention specialist. Recommendations were made for what our team could do now, soon, or later in 9 areas. These are the 9 areas of focus. Each were rated as either emerging, developing, proficient, or exemplary. Emerging was defined as communications in this area are in the beginning stages with minimal evidence of identified tactics. Developing was defined as communications in this area showed evidence of some basic tactics, but attention is needed to address gaps and improve communication practices. Proficient was defined as communications in this area are delivered consistently and with intentionality, demonstrating a strategic communication approach that meets identified standards. Exemplary was defined as communication in this area demonstrate deep understanding of strategic communications with evidence that exceeds standard tactics and provides additional growth opportunities. You can see that we had 3 emerging areas, which were external communication, brand experience and reputation, and student enrollment, retention, and recruitment. 5 developing areas included communication strategy and planning, internal communication and engagement, parent-family communication, stakeholder engagement, and employee retention and recruitment. And 1 proficient area was crisis communication and preparedness. Under each of these 9 areas, CISO had recommendations for the team to do now, soon, or later to help improve these areas. Many of the suggestions our team has started or plans to do. This is reflected in our full communication plan. If you'd like to see a copy of the baseline assessment report, it's also available in your packets. So the next step in the process is to share research findings in the situational analysis portion of the communication plan. You'll see that on page 1 of the full communication plan. In this area, we also mention our current environment, the size and scope of our district, our community relations team being fairly new, connection to our strategic plan, all the survey results, and the top languages other than English in our school districts. On page 2 of the full plan, you'll see the goals of our community relations team is focusing on in relation to the communications plan. They are to increase the awareness of who Osseo Area Schools is and what it promises and strives to achieve, to build pride in and support for Osseo Area Schools, its scholars and staff members, to create a systematized communication program that shares timely, relevant, and easily accessible information, to utilize 2-way communication practices that build engagement, and to be inclusive of our diverse scholars, families, staff members, and community members. So the main audiences we focus on in our plan are staff members, scholars, parents and caregivers, and the greater community. Specific increases are quantified and time-driven in the full plan. A lot of them have a 3-year, I would say, time schedule. And they center around increasing trust, increasing audiences feeling informed, increasing audiences being able to accurately reshare information, bringing more district communications to the top of our source list, maintaining or exceeding quality of education. 2 notes. When we were coming up with these objectives, we knew it was important for staff members to wholeheartedly believe in our mission and accurately share information. Time and time again, it's been proven that families and community members believe district employees on the front lines, like teachers, administrative assistants, and bus drivers. So with our goals and objectives set, we work through what strategies we should focus on communications-wise. For all audiences, communication strategies included highlighting positive connections between staff, scholars, and families, utilizing a storytelling approach that includes emotion and imagery, utilizing simple and easy to understand language, continually aligning to the district's brand and strategic plan, ensuring impact is clearly visible and aligns with intent, and utilizing one-to-one communication when possible. For staff members, we also included emphasizing the important role staff members have as ambassadors. Action strategies are those things we need to do as community relations team members behind the scenes, so to speak, to be able to meet the goals and objectives. Our action strategies are continually analyzing the environment to determine if there are topics that need engagement on, continually reviewing our news calendar, continually reviewing commemorative observances and recognitions, updating district and school communications to meet best practices, strengthening our partnerships with FACE, Human Resources, Enrollment Center, Community Ed, parent involvement in schools and programs, and refining our translation process and begin surveying non-English speaking families more regularly. In regard to the partnerships action strategy, our community relations team has started much work on this. Tanya works closely with student enrollment teams. Megan is focused on our kindergarten information fair, a piece of our student enrollment efforts, and Ashley works closely with our staff recruitment and retention teams. I've been making connections with FACE and translation teams as well as Community Ed. We also have pretty robust student enrollment communication plan and are working on a staff recruitment and retention plan. These separate plans dive into the specifics of these areas a bit more and use both similar and different tactics and tools to get the word out. These are the key messages we utilize in much of our communications work. You've likely been seeing some of these already. Osseo area schools is a great place to learn, scholars dream, explore, and discover. The district's new strategic plan is helping to move the district and its schools to the next level of excellence. The focus is on individual learning needs of students. There has been a track record of success. 1,400 scholars graduate district schools each year. Community survey results say the district is exceeding expectations. And please continue to share your thoughts via welisten@district279.org. Now, kind of the nuts and bolts part, the tactics, the kind of exciting part. The tactics and tools that will be used to communicate are as follows. There are some familiar tactics and tools, but also some new ones based on our research. The specifics of these, including the budget, staff responsible, and timeline, are shared in the full plan. The tables under each audience share this detail. This is a listing, so know that choosing the right communication channels in the right sequence at the right time is vital. So we lead off the tactics and tools with our digital communications. We have our website, e-newsletter. We have both staff and community versions of that. We have a variety of email tools that we can share. We also have our voicemail and email or text options. We actually are moving to a system at the district level right now. We don't have as easy of a way to send text messages, so we're including that now, and hopefully that will be actually in the next few weeks that we'll have the ability to do that. Social media, so we're on Facebook and Twitter right now. We're thinking about adding Instagram here soon. Video-wise, we're doing lots of videos. We are going to add a new feature, so we're going to be getting out to each school and program to do a feature video for them. This is going to take a little bit of time, obviously, but we're committed to doing it. Also, Superintendent Features, we would like to do that as well. We have our monitors and TV displays at all of our schools. We'd like to utilize those a bit more. Loudspeaker announcements, I know those are used as well, but partnering with our schools to do even more. Hallway displays, outdoor sign at the ESC here, and then, of course, our points of pride at our school board meetings. Print-wise, we have our district brochure. Have you heard postcards? That's kind of considered our newsletter right now, but we're planning on adding a newsletter, so kind of alternating them between the postcard and a kind of a longer newsletter. We're still kind of thinking how long that might be, but we're finding it really hard to get all the information into the Have You Heard postcard, but it still could be really advantageous as well. So thinking of reaching out instead of 3 times, potentially 4 times to our residents. Our focus on finances brochure, which was started last May, we're going to be continuing to do that, especially approaching potential referendums here. And then guides and toolkits, we have a lot of these, but we'd like to refine them even further. Advertisements wise, we have our community guides and newsletters. We've been doing a little bit more of that, but I know that has been done in the past a little bit. We're exploring the idea of doing some community signs or some billboards. Recently, with enrollment, we did that Osseo sign not too far away from here, and that was a very reasonable cost, so we might be doing something like that again. Online-wise, we're doing some Facebook ads, but we've also explored into Google a little bit, and that's been very successful. Some campaigns, these are all new, but we would like to do a campaign on fast facts for staff that we'd likely include in a variety of our staff communications. A staff spotlight, so focusing on our staff and ways to celebrate them and all the great things that they're doing. And then also a graduate spotlight, and I love how Rebecca was talking about the grad that was a part of her group, so that would be one really great way to start, reaching out to that student and talking to him. And then, of course, regular connections, because really those relationships are so key, so getting out and talking and with all the folks that we can, staff-wise and community-wise, so community events and meetings here too. I wanted to make a note on the translation portion too. In partnering with our translation team, we are all working hard to get English and non-English communications shared at the same time as much as possible. This is more in regard to our mass notifications, so email, voicemail, and or text. Our website has an auto translation feature on it that can be improved for accuracy by our translation team via a system called Weglot. We're just starting to work through this process right now. And we have the capability to add non-English subtitles on our videos. We're working on getting our e-newsletter auto-translated as well. Now I'm going to turn it to the team here to share a few examples of these tactics and tools and actions.
So I'm Ashley, and one of the things that really is most meaningful in my work is being on the ground level, where I get to tell stories that are everyday experiences for our students and staff. And so these are all really wonderful features that I've been able to do while I was here. One of the stories has not come out yet, but will be coming out this week. So the little girl with the ball, it's from a cardio drumming experience at Park Hrc Elementary School. But this team has been a really wonderful experience to be a part of, and also as a part of the district. And again, it's just really impactful to be a part of a community that cares so much about the experience of students and getting them acclimated into our everyday world. And I know they both have wonderful things to share with you as well. Thank you.
So I'm Megan once again, and as a communication specialist, I love being able to learn about and feature all of the great things that are going on in all of the schools in the district. And one example of this was with Black History Month. From elementary to middle to high school, staff and scholars found unique ways to honor it this month, from decorating their hallways to learning about key historical figures. And I brought all the information together in one featured story. We received responses and photographs from 19 schools and programs in the district for this story, but I know that, throughout the district this month was celebrated and will continue to be.
Good evening, Tanya again. And so I primarily do a lot of video production, and so with this example here that we will be watching shortly is one example of our storytelling during Black History Month, February 2022. And Ashley wrote the website article, and so we went together, and it was really, really fun to do that, to work together. And then I created this video about how one Northview Middle School band teacher engaged students in African American spirituals. Their concert will be March 23rd as well, and that is in the website article. For me, like what both Megan and Ashley had mentioned, the best part about going to do these stories and just going out to the schools is more about just getting to talk to the teachers and the students and then sharing what they're doing. And it's really like, I just really enjoy like talking to them and getting to know them at a like deeper level than just even what the story is about to tell. And so it's very rewarding for me that way. And I would like to invite you to take a look at the video now.
1, 2, 25, here we go!
I think the most important thing is to find material, literature for the kids, that speaks to them, that's part of their experience, that's meaningful in their lives, not just mine. If you trace the lineage of almost all the pop music we listen to back, you will find African American music. So if you don't know African American music, you don't know music.
They actually care about Black people. Like they didn't just like they actually talked about it. They didn't just like let it go. Actually talk about it. It makes me feel like I belong here.
We saw a video of Mavis Staples. You may have heard of Staples, Mavis. And she actually, when she was a young person, did a few marches with Dr. Martin Luther King. She's actually from Chicago, not from like Selma or anywhere, but she relates the story of how they got thrown out of a white restaurant and they sang, "We shall not be moved." And in that same piece, I made the arrangement because it's, you know, an old market thing, it's public domain, nobody owns the song. And so I wrote the arrangement to fit the band, their skills, and the instrumentation tab.
And then this video does have captions on it. I just didn't see until you turn it on here. So, but this video does have captions in English, so anyone can see it. And it with YouTube, we'll use rev.com as well as YouTube to help us with captions, and we can go in and edit them as well. So thank you.
Awesome. 1, 2, 25, here.
Thank you so much. We have a really great team here, and it's really exciting to be a part of it. Our communications and storytelling approach has increased in just a few months' time, I would say. All of us continue to build relationships to improve this even further. As I shared earlier, evaluation is extremely important. Our community relations team has a number of statistics they review in regard to viewership and clicks with our digital communications. Our routine surveys are also very helpful to see if we reached our goals and objectives. Thought exchanges are a new qualitative way that we can gather feedback as well. You'll be seeing this program being utilized over the next few months. And then last but not least, spot checks, which essentially is us checking in with a person or small group of persons from one of our audience groups to see what they know and understand about us. So thank you again for letting us take the time to share our district-wide communication plan with you tonight. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you so much. It's so good to hear all this and meet all of you. I'm going to open it up if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you so much for putting together a thoroughly researched and diverse look at not only all the challenges that we have in communications, but the multitude of channels that make getting engagement and reach so much more difficult. I appreciate also that you kind of gave an update on the progress on translation time. Are we able to send out crisis messaging translated simultaneously at this point?
We're trying our best to do that, so I'm working with Kirsten's team quite a bit on that. I definitely think we've improved on that. The best kind of approach that we've had so far is just me kind of being in the know on, hey, we probably have something coming up here soon. So I usually give her a heads up and kind of give her an idea on time, and she gets the team prepped up, ready to go. So we try to meet, that deadline as much as we can, based on her team's capability, and then kind of when we need to get the message out. And sometimes we've even delayed if we can a little bit so that we can match that up a little bit. So we're getting in a good groove. I think we've definitely improved, but I think there's some definitely things that we can do to get even better.
Right, well, communications is one of those things that it's never done. I really appreciate, and I think we should applaud the district and your work as well for really staying on top of the crisis management communications, because that has been no easy task over the last couple years. And, it feels really good to know that we've been able to function and keep people abreast of what's going on, and that there's this space right now for you to fill in a lot of those other gaps about reach and engagement. So thank you, Kay, and to your team.
Thank you. All right, anyone else?
Yes, please. First, I just want to say that I love the idea about the graduate spotlight. I think that when we talk about our alumni and we look at the makeup of our district right now, a lot of our staff that we have were graduates of our district. And then also when you just look at the broader community, a lot of people stick around. Minnesota tends to be a state where people stay. And so I think highlighting that, and then also when you think about how those people impact our younger generations. So maybe not just like our recent grads, but maybe a few years out, somebody has achieved something really successful. Maybe they became the president of a company or CEO or something, whatever it is that they've done, to really highlight that and say, hey, I think it shows our kids that they have opportunities that are going to be farther out, and it might take time and work to get there, but that they do have that, and I think that's so important. So I love that idea. And also I just wanted to say hello and hi and thank you to the new team members who I haven't met in person yet, so I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. And I did have a couple of questions. One of the first questions that I'm going to ask about is the We Listen. So 2 questions, I guess, about that. Number 1 is, board members, sometimes you will forward those things to us because it's really a question directed to the board, and sometimes we don't. So could you just talk a little bit about that, just so that people watching kind of understand that not everything they send to We Listen will come to the board?
Yeah, We Listen is definitely, so it's We Listen at district279.org. That is definitely like our, I would say, district general email. So not necessarily, that is not something that board members necessarily see. Actually, Megan on our team, and maybe Megan could talk about it a little bit more, she is the one that gets those emails. So if it's specific to the board, you probably will see her forwarding along things. Or sometimes it's a case where multiple, like the board email and We Listen are copied in on it. Sure. I don't know, Megan, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, like Kay said, a lot of times if it is a question or statement directed towards the board, they do like to include everyone in the email. But really just in general with the We Listen emails, it's just kind of a gateway to connecting them with the information they need and, the different general area that they're looking for. So a lot of times they're looking for enrollment, or they're looking for, specific information that we can help them find a little bit easier than if they were looking for it on the website.
So just before you go real
Yeah.
quick, so would you say that the We Listen button is more of a opportunity for people to questions, concerns type button versus a we want the board to hear about this complaint type situation?
I would say it's probably 50-50 questions and feedback. So it's really an opportunity for people to either get quick information or let themselves be heard.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then I had another question and I'm losing it. I'm so sorry. All right, you'll have to come back to me.
Okay. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah. So to that point, the graduate alumni, the way that I'm envisioning it is, I imagine you were maybe thinking about highlighting that through social media and all those things, but also think to Heather's point, it might be important to also get that information to our students directly, so that they can see what their future, may look like. I also wanted to comment on Director Grady's comment regarding the crisis management. So I know that one of the things that has come up often is the fact that, as parents or even as board members, we often feel like the last people to find out what's actually happening in the schools. And I can imagine having to also manage the translation part of that as well. It just adds to the complexity and the time of that information actually getting to parents or board members. And so I'm just when can we expect to see some sort of, I don't know, crisis management plan or communication plan that we can also sort of rely on and for accountability?
We definitely have like a step-by-step guide that we go through each time that there is a crisis on who we communicate with and kind of like the order of that, because it is very important to get that right. We want to make sure our staff know first. And school board members are at the top of that list with staff. A lot of times you're getting it before the staff members, I would say. In a crisis situation, time is of the essence in a lot of cases. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of time between, I would say, when staff and you as school board members are getting it compared to when parents are getting it. And it kind of depends on how it's shared too. Like if we're using email, voicemail, text sort of systems, I feel like the voicemail and text grabs the attention of folks a bit more. So if it's email, I think it gets a little hard on when people are receiving it, although it is quicker, I would say, like in our mass notification system. The phone is a little bit, it takes some time to go through that, but text is pretty quick as well.
I do want to say, Superintendent, you've been great at letting us know, I think, as soon as you possibly can, but we know that social media is a challenge, and youth are getting that information out much faster than I think you guys are.
True or untrue.
Right, so, yeah.
Yeah, that is a great point there.
That's
I
part
know
of the
that's
problem.
something that we need to continue to work on and look at, but.
And I would say even in some situations like that, we're finding out via social media. And I mean, it's every crisis situation is unique. I mean, you can prepare as much, and I mean, we definitely have some places that we start at, and we kind of reuse some things over and over. But we're always tweaking it. It's just it's every situation is very unique, and social media does just create a new dynamic to it for sure. But we try to get things. We want to make sure that things are accurate, though. So we want to. We're trying the best we can to get it out quickly, but we need to make sure that it's accurate before we go ahead and do that, because we don't want to spread rumors that aren't true. And even though there may be some inaccurate information in what they're sharing, we need to make sure that they're hearing the right information from us. And it is preferable that they hear from us first and that you hear from us first. But again, social media sometimes gets in the way of that.
Just a couple others. So on that social media aspect, I know that there is a lot of misinformation out there on any given day about what's happening in the district. Do we have any sort of way or method of responding or sort of immediately being a part of that conversation versus just letting it get out of hand?
We are taking a look at it. I mean, we're constantly kind of reviewing all the community groups that we're aware of. I mean, there's probably some more, but we're definitely in tune with what's going on kind of outside of our controlled channels, I would say. So we are looking at those. I do find a lot of times if you kind of let it sit for a little bit, people do kind of jump in and self-regulate themselves. So we try not to insert, I mean, that's kind of a best practices communication-wise, to try not to insert yourself too much, but we could definitely do it to some degree, and probably with the referendum, I would see that being probably highly likely. But again, you'd rather have it come from that word of mouth. People believe so much, and we want to make sure that potentially it's coming from other sources as well, not just from our voice. So it's a delicate thing for sure. One of my thoughts that I had would be to grow that relationship with, I think it's especially like that friends and family group that's out there, potentially grow the relationship with some of the contributors or kind of main persons on that page, so that we can just, so they're in the know on what's going on. Because it kind of seems to be consistently the same kind of folks sharing. So if we could kind of grow our relationship with them, they might be more in tune on what's going on as well, so that maybe they are sharing more accurate information.
I know that staff across the district have been great at jumping in and responding and trying to provide accurate information as well. But, you know, that sort of, where's the line on that, and is that actually their responsibility to do that? So
yeah.
And the last question I have, and I'll turn it over, the spot checks. Just wondering if you are partnering with like the FACE team or any other groups to make sure that you're doing the spot checks with.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Yep. We're just trying to grow that partnership, I would say. But we're working on that for sure. Definitely.
I have remembered my questions, if that's okay. All right, so the first thing that I wanted to say is I am happy to know that we used a third party to really assess this. And I wanted to know two things. Number one was did you learn anything through that was surprising, and why was it surprising? And then the other thing I wanted to know about was, and I think these kind of maybe tie in together, is that on one of the slides you had said update district or school communications to meet best practices. What are the best practices that we're trying to meet?
Those are, I'll start with the best practices kind of portion of that right away. They're all over the board. So I would say this is kind of what I envision sharing kind of best practices. So I'd like to have like one-pagers. I mean, obviously we can go and share this in person and talk through some presentation, but I would like to have one-pagers that talk about like all these different channels and say, you know, this is kind of the way that you could be doing this. These are some ways to be doing this. So that's kind of what I would like to get with schools. But right now, we're just going out to kind of see what schools are doing, and we're still gathering that information. I would say I've talked with maybe half the principals thus far, and I want to really go out and get to know them, get into their school and take a visit. So I'm finding that out as I'm going out. Just today I was at Zanewood, so I found out a little bit more information about them and kind of how they communicate with their families and ask for ways that we can help to improve that as well. So providing schools, that kind of goes in tandem with that toolkit and best practices, that making sure that they know kind of where we are best practice-wise and if we can assist in any way, because we want to help them out as well. I think it's just going to take a little bit to get there, though. One of the things, I'm trying to think of one of the things that I was surprised with in regards to the, maybe this isn't too surprising, but I did add it at the, I think maybe even more to the group. One of the things I added at the bottom of the communication plan that we're going to take a look at in the future is probably just like our brand overall and kind of where we want to head potentially. Because we kind of have this District 279 Osseo area schools vibe going right now. So that's something that we definitely will probably be looking at down the road. It might be something that, I mean, just because we're all kind of immersed in it, something that might be a little bit surprising to everyone. But I think that's something that we should not take a look at right now, but in the future.
Okay, thank you. Who else?
So, yeah, I appreciate the assessment. It's, you can't improve what you don't know that you have as a growth area. I am a little surprised at how many were lower on the scale, but it's good to know that, and it's good to know the direction that you're taking. Love the storytelling approach. Love that it's going to be tied to our strategic plan. I really, some of the things that I find most interesting are the CCX stories that they do, and I'm guessing that you work in partnership with them, and that's always really fun, the spotlights, and that has a pretty good reach across the community too. So I feel like we want to make sure that we tell our story of who we are as a district in some of that messages. So I'll be curious to know later, like, what are some of those brand messages that you're putting out there about who we are, maybe things around our values that we've created as part of who we are as a district, the success stories, the fact that we're here to serve students, so how are students being served, how are they finding their path, how are we achieving our mission from them, for them, from them, from their story. So, yeah, just interested to see it come to life.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you
I
for all the work.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Jackie, did yours?
I have a couple of things. I want to reiterate with what Director Simon said about the storytelling. I think that's something that we've been hoping for a while. I'm going to put a plug in for doing some good storytelling around Zanewood as a former and a current Northwest Suburban Integration School District joint board member. I just think that's an under appreciated magnet program that we have waiting lists at Weaver, and I'm surprised we don't at Zanewood with the STEAM program there. So that's my little plug-in for one to tell some good stories. I really appreciated the Northview stories, so thank you. I appreciate the inclusion of the communication since I first came on board of using the emotion piece in our communications. I think for a while we were trying to be so professional, we forgot we were working with human beings. And so, not that we forgot, but you know what I'm saying, we were trying to be professional and legal and all that, and we need to have a little more relation, because this is a relationship business, right? So I appreciate that. My question is, outside of district organizations like FACE and Community Ed, et cetera, do we have relationships with any of outside community organizations? I'm just thinking like the Liberian organization or CAL or some groups that may or may not have different preferences for communication.
We definitely included that on the plan. I think there was a mention of like some chambers and rotaries, but it, definitely if there's suggestions that you have for community organizations that we should be a part of. I think this is especially as we kind of head into the future here, I think it's really important that we do that. I think it's going to take all of us as a leadership team to do that, and I think being involved with those community organizations is really important. So yes, we'd like to do that. And like I said, if there's suggestions that you have, we're completely open to that.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, Kate, I don't even think you've been here a year yet, have you?
Not quite.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is pretty impressive to have a, you know, I know Barb left in a really, you know, good, great, strong foundation, but I mean, I'm just so grateful. I think that your approach it's so thoughtful and it's so intentional, and I mean, given what we've been in the last like year, I mean, our emails have increased exponentially. I mean, and the expectation and it's, you know, very responsive in the midst of crisis and handling and all that. And then now you have your team, you know, that, you know, I know everyone's fairly new, but you guys are doing great work. And I think I appreciate how flexible you are and nimble with us too. I know we'll say to Corey, what about this? And so I know you get that to your team, and you're so responsive to us. So thank you so much for all this work, and we're excited to continue working together on our communications, and we have a lot more to do in terms of the referendum, which we're going to talk about next, and some other things. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and as we transition, just a couple comments. I think you saw some themes here. You saw a multi-phase, multi-year rollout here now that we've done the assessment. I love what you said, Director Simons, about studying yourself. And what I really appreciated about this team was the hunger for, like, how are we doing? And being really open to, I think the assessment was probably harder on us than our communities are. We get really good ratings, and yet we said, tell us where we can really improve. So there's excitement in that room for improvement, because just think what we can be and what we aspire to. I think as a district, we struggled, having worked in other large districts and other small districts, there's always this delicate balance of local control and district standardized approaches or practices, and striking the right balance. And I think this team has honor the unique things of each school, but yet there's some messaging and communications we need to do consistently in a very standardized way. And where can we tighten up those things as well? So it's a little bit of both. And then the last thing I'll mention that didn't come up here is just the tremendous effort that's going to come with all the digital and print updating of our mission, vision, core values. It's a huge undertaking, and I saw mock-ups in Kay's office. That's all happening as well. It's a major project. So I want to share my appreciation for I know Kay has many days, has a plan for the day, and I come in and I wreck it. And it throws everything in the tailspin, or I do that at 10 o'clock the night. Yeah. So this is a hard job because you're always on, right? And I always expect she's available, right? Yeah. So, and her team, and they just always step up to the moment through everything that we've been through in the last year. And this is a relatively new team, and that's exciting because there's new ideas and new strategies, and a true desire to go out and listen to our communities and find out what will work best for us. So, great. Thank you all very much for your hard work.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Corey at 7:46. Okay, we got on track again.
Yeah, we did pretty good. Thanks, Kay and team, for keeping us on track. Right.
Does anybody need to have a break at all? Yes, okay, 5 minutes.
5
Everybody
minutes?
looks at me.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, what's the score of the Maple Grove Champlain Park basketball game? How do we get on CCX? They're streaming live from CCX. Nobody cares.
Chair Dawson, Walton, and board members, thank you for the opportunity to come to you tonight with some information regarding our referendum that's coming our way that is set to expire after the 23-24 school year. I do want to make a note here that John Morstead, our Executive Director of Finance and Operations, had a prior commitment, and that couldn't be changed. Please know he and his team have been an integral part of this information, and you'll see him again, in the meetings coming up here as well. So thank you to Kay and Anthony and others for stepping in his place. Just some background here before we get into our agenda. So voters in our district approved a 10-year operating and tech levy that provides those operating funds to support programming and services, and that capital technology levy as well that expires after the 23-24 school year. So we're planning on the opportunity to go back to our voters in November to make sure we maintain the current levels of service and enter into a time where we won't have to go through significant budget reductions should we be able to continue that levy. One of the most important jobs you do as a board is setting that course for financial stability. We talk a lot about that. So we don't take this lightly. It's really one of the most important things you do as a board, and you do that together. And another observation is we haven't gone through a referendum in a really long time. So nearly 10 years. So it's a big decision, and we know it's a big decision for our community as well. And tonight is just really meant to be informational. You're not making any decisions tonight. Our goal is to give you information for you to ponder and consider, and we'll be having multiple touch points with you as you evaluate next steps between meetings here. So our goal tonight is to inform you and really to help you make the best decision possible. You've heard about some of the residential survey results. We'll be touching on a couple of those pieces again as it relates to this. It was just last month when Peter Leatherman was here. At the end, we'll ask what questions do you have and what additional information you would like or you feel like you need from our team moving forward. So tonight, and we'll try to move through this as quickly as we can. I think you probably had the opportunity to look at this in advance. I don't want to move too quickly, but I think some of it's pretty familiar to you. So our goal tonight is to hit on some key timelines, some key information around that, the operating and capital projects levy, and those explanations, ballot options, tax impact. We have some help here from Ellers tonight with us as well, so we're appreciative of that support. A little bit about the informational campaign, and then next steps. So planning and the work that brought us here. It's really important to point out the tremendous amount of planning and work that's brought us to this point by a number of stakeholders. The financial involvement in school community accountability liaisons, we call it fiscal committee, otherwise known as fiscal committee, and our DTAC committee both have discussed the possibility of a referendum at length and agree that they are needed. In this work, I want to really point out that the direct connection to our strategic plan here. So as we aspire to achieve our vision of unleashing and enhancing the brilliance of our scholars to thrive and change the world, these resources provide us the capacity to actualize that, live out our mission, vision, and our core values of innovation, excellence, and transparency. I believe it really hits all of the strategic directions as well. I won't read through all those, but I think it's really critical for us to think of how we fund the efforts to realize the new plan that and the new roadmap you've put together for us. This is a timeline at a glance. You can see some of the key markers here. I won't go through all of this, but it is the tentative timeline for the referendum to be held this fall. And just a couple key pieces here. Number one, that first step, which reflects the research phase, that has been done. And we're working through steps 2 and 3, and then moving towards, at the time, if that's right for this spring, and should you want to move forward, that informational campaign that hits steps 4, 5, and 6, that then moves us towards the potential for Election Day on Tuesday, November 8th. Just a couple key pieces as far as grounding from the residential survey we just saw last month. The survey results indicated some really important things for us. There's strong support for the quality of our schools. The value provided by our schools is favorable. The desire for all or most student needs to be met in a number of ways. It really pointed out our teachers and our classrooms and our programs are our strength. We have strong financial management credibility. And Interestingly, our tax environment has moved. I think it was presented to us last month. We went from a hostile to a more tax-sensitive environment, and that change in perception that was shared with us before. This next slide is the kind of a time, I know it's hard to see, sorry about that, but it's really, it took the last 10 years and mapped it out, and really it's just a way to visually reflect where we're at in the process here. So we will be moving into year 9 of the 10-year levy, and that means that, again, they're both set to expire after the 23-24 school year. So also noted is that operating levy is approximately $35.5 million, and the capital projects is about $8.8 million a year, spread over that time. Just from a high-level perspective, I think it's important to see the big picture. This pie chart shows our district budget funding sources. You've seen this before with our financial budgeting projections with Kelly Benusa and John Morstead. It's important to kind of point out that the district, we have about almost $2.9 million received by the state, which is about 70% of our budget. The local and property tax levies is about 22% of our budget, which is right around $65 million. And then the federal funds, about 7% of our budget, which is close to $20 million here, along with an additional $4 million of local miscellaneous numbers. This next slide is one of the more critical slides, I think, for you to see this evening. And I'll point out a few key reasons why. If we look at the next 7 years, this gives you some sense of what would happen if nothing was addressed without our current operating and capital levies. So you would see a big drop in funding in that 24-25 school year moving forward. That could be as much as $33 million or more based on kind of the inflationary factors. So that's in those orange sections at the top of that graph. When you think of federal numbers, which is the bottom light blue section, we've received a number of one-time dollars from emergency relief funding. We refer to that as the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, or we say ESSERs. We've had 3 rounds of that. Again, pointing out those are one-time dollars, and those funds are being used to really provide services that align to your board priorities and our community priorities. And these cannot, and I really caution and help people understand that these cannot be considered a replacement for operating levy and those funding sources, because they are one-time and they are sunsetting. So you can see that kind of that drop off when those dollars go away. And should we not renew our operating levy, that is felt even, we will feel that even more. So more specifically, that second round of ESSERS dollars that we had provided to the district, of that $12 million, about $7 million of that was direct support. It really funds about 20 FTE that gets into things like academic intervention in math and reading, student services supports in special education, English learners, programming, our homeless services, and then also the mental health services and supports. That includes our school counselors, social workers, and our clinical and therapeutic staff services as well. So in the third round, if you remember in our planning, we used about $20 million of that third round, and that in essence covers over 85 staff. So those two sources of funds that pay for well over 100 staff, those go away. And if we don't plan for that, that can be a real painful reality for us. So the operating renewal and potentially going to the cap can bridge the difference and bridge that gap to sustain and continue maintaining that level of service that we've put in place here the last couple of years. So this is a kind of a key visual graph to show you how that could happen should we not move forward with that renewal or move potentially up to the cap that we're eligible for. This next slide is just a little bit of a different breakdown for you. I won't go through all these pieces, but it's a way to reflect how the money is spent in our budget, everywhere from our regular instruction and general instruction through special education, instructional support, student services, administration, vocational education, and then of the other key areas of funding. So it gives you a visual breakdown. The next slide, this is a reminder, it's good for our internal team as well, that we are in the state of Minnesota, there's a referendum allowance, and the statute describes the specific steps and how that's calculated as each district who goes forward with this based on those requirements by the state. And there's also, on the next slide, the allowance limit. So this talks about how the limit or the cap is calculated in Minnesota. And we know approximately what this level will be. We don't have an official number until about July. This means that if we did move forward with the desire to hold an election with ballot language that we want to move to the cap, we may have to come back and slightly tweak that number once we get the final data and that operating dollar figure. This is a regular routine process districts go through, and it's a typical process, but I want to point out that there's tightening of the actual projection or the numbers as we get a little further into the school year and into the summer. We saw last month, just quickly, I thought I'd highlight here, our residential survey indicated that the majority of our residents did support an increase of $3 or more, and Peter, I believe, said that the acceptable level is probably right around that $7 mark, so that's the tolerable amount. There's still about 10% out there that weren't sure in this survey, so that's opportunity for us to help understand the need we have. In the capital or in technology side, the tax tolerance showed in the survey as well that the majority, or about 65%, were willing to pay about $2 more per month. So again, there was about 10% that were unsure. So if you think of it in this way, it feels like at this point, thinking about a $7 operating and a $2 technology per month increase would be getting us in around thinking about going to the cap. Anthony will have a little bit more about that in a minute. Actually, I'm going to turn over to Anthony now, I think. Here we go.
Good evening, everyone. As we have looked to the future around facilities and learning, our planning has been themed around building a better future. This work originally stemmed out of future enrollment and capacity needs identified through ECMEC and has grown to encompass both learning and facility needs. As we started with facilities, we had to ask the question, what should learning look like? That question led our planning teams to explore what future learning looks like and then discuss what are the facilities needed to foster that environment. This has included reviews around next generation learning spaces, CTE programming, facility use, technology, and the people that operate within those spaces. As we move our work forward, and we're talking about levy and referendum, looking at the funding sources to support our work moving forward, building a better future will be broken into 2 phases. Phase 1 will focus on learning needs and will likely be 2 questions centered around operating and capital projects, or commonly known as the tech levy. And phase 2 will be focused on looking at facility needs and will likely be 1 question. If we think about levy and bonds, as you see phase 1 and 2 on the slide, levies are for learning, bonds are for building. So phase 1, as we think about levy referendums, we're thinking about the funding sources to do the people, the resources, the curriculum that will go into spaces. And a future bond referendum would be around the facility needs, construction of new buildings, additions, remodels, and so forth. So this leads us to potentially 2 referendums. One likely in November of 2022, and the other possibly in November of 2023. So as we talk about our work moving forward, we want to make sure we're transparent and looking at this as a complete package over the next 2 years, rather than just isolating and focusing with specifically what's occurring in November. As we look at specifically the operating levy, as Superintendent McIntyre shared earlier, we're approaching year 9 of our current operating levy. The Fiscal Involvement School Community Accountability Liaisons, or FISCAL, has discussed the need to move forward the operating referendum to voters and is in support of doing so. As we discuss the operating levy, you'll hear and see per pupil or student dollar figures and total dollar figures. The reason for this is that operating levies are based on student enrollment. You'll see in the proposed ballot language in the next few minutes that our team is recommending we go to the allowed limit or cap. Eller's estimate, it would be about $366.45 per pupil to do this, and this would generate approximately $8.1 million more than our current authorization. The priorities would be to continue what we do for day-to-day learning and instructional operations. So if we think about our existing operating levy, it's funding curriculum, instructional resources, and bodies to support instruction within the classroom space. As Corey also mentioned, we've had growing needs around mental health, social emotional learning, and other intervention and support services. So by looking at those additional things we need to support and maintain good instructional environments in our system, those additional dollars would go towards looking at more individualized instruction, creating instructional intervention opportunities and strengthening those intervention opportunities, developing and maintaining and structuring multi-tiered systems of support, and really continuing the expansion that we've done around mental health needs, counseling needs that are currently being funded out of one-time dollars within ESSERS. This increase will also help to mitigate budgetary cuts that are anticipated to begin in fiscal year 24. And as we think about that bond in the future, this increase will also help to cover the cost of operations. So one thing that we think about is if we build a new facility in the future because of potential community expansion and needing an elementary, we also have to pay for staff and resources to go in there. So sometimes what you'll see districts do is the bond, and then all of a sudden they go and ask for a levy in order to find the people and the resources to go into that space. Looking at the tech levy, as Superintendent McIntyre also shared, that we're approaching year 9 of our current capital projects levy for technology. The District Technology Advisory Committee, or DTAC, has discussed the need to move forward the capital projects referendum to voters and is in support of doing so. Our current technology levy is focused on supporting the technology needs of our systems in alignment with our Digital Learning for All plan that was outlined in the original vote 9 years ago. The current funding has been operationalized to maintain and sustain our current level as outlined in the plan. It can be broken down into 3 key areas: infrastructure, instructional, and technology support staff. When we think about the infrastructure, we're really talking about internet, network equipment, phone systems, Microsoft licensing, some of our big operational system licensing that goes into making sure that all of our devices and things can connect and we can be productive. When we think about instructional, this is really looking at the student devices, teacher computers, student computer labs, classroom technologies, the software systems that students engage with and interact with, Schoology, Seesaw, Newsela, some of those other learning software, and then staff support. If we break this out percentage-wise, this chart shows how we're currently distributing the capital projects levy in regards to the areas I just identified. Approximately 60% of these dollars are spent annually on equipment and software that directly impact student learning on a daily basis, whether it's the technology hardware they interact with in the classroom, software systems they access for learning, or the infrastructure to keep them connected. The remaining dollars are spent on the staff to ensure we are responsive in keeping the technology functional and operating. As a note, the current technology levy does not cover all the technology needs of our district, and increasing technology needs beyond just instruction are creating greater funding demands from other revenue sources. So as we look to the future of the technology levy, you'll hear and see percentages. The reason for this is that the capital projects levy are based on net tax capacity. You'll see in the proposed ballot language in the next few slides that our team is recommending we increase our capital projects levy by 1%, so we would go from 3.7% to 4.7%. This would generate an additional $2.3 million, bringing the total to $11.1 million annually. This increase is needed to address several identified and emerging technology needs for the long term. First, we would have the core of the technology levy still go to maintain the current technology operations that we've established. But the things that we've identified that are continuing to grow greater is one being safety and security. So if we think about all our digital card access readers, visitor management systems, the digital cameras, security camera systems that have all been implemented over the last several years by our amazing safety and security team, all of those are in a digitized fashion. Most of that came in with one-time funding, grants or other one-time funding sources. So looking at how we can maintain that and sustain that over the long term. The other large safety and security piece that wasn't as much on the front of all of our minds 9-10 years ago is the concept of cybersecurity, which has increasingly become a high demand and a hot topic within our area. Specifically for Osseo area schools, as we've worked with our cybersecurity insurance provider and bolstered our cyber security posture, we have increased on an annual of roughly $150,000 to $200,000 annual in software supports and resources to ensure that we're providing adequate cybersecurity postures. Other areas that we would look at with this increased funding is as we talk about building a better future and reconfiguring spaces, there's going to be some new technology needs that go into what we call next generation learning spaces in these flexible learning spaces. One concept right away that we know we need to navigate is a lot of our classrooms still have older, antiquated projector systems that we're slowly switching out for these larger digital displays that are reliable and provide a better picture back into the students for learning. We need funding sources in order to maintain that in a fashion that may not take us 10 years, but could condense how fast we could get that technology into those classrooms. Equitable technology access is another big topic that we've talked about where the increased dollar amounts would go. And if we think about the pandemic and how things have changed over the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, we didn't provide any at-home hotspots for students to be able to access the internet when they leave Osseo area schools. We've been providing for the last 2 years, either through ESSER dollars or reprioritizing the dollars within the tech levy so some projects couldn't occur, to ensure that we maintain and have equitable resources for when students leave our physical school buildings to be able to access the learning materials that they need in a digital fashion. And the last one is infrastructure enhancements and replacements. Our wide area network, or the fiber that connects all of our building, we own that. We're now at about 21, 22 years old, and we're starting to see the stress in some of our stretches, and have had in the last year 3 fiber breaks that we've had to come through and replace. So we know that wide area network is aging, and we need to make sure that we have some capacity to ensure that we can have a reliable and resilient infrastructure that connects all of our sites together. Quickly touching on the bond, we're not looking at a bond for this November, but just to give that concept in the back. A bond is for facilities, or bond for building, and is potentially part of our Building a Better Future plan, Phase 2. However, it will not be asked of voters this fall. There's still some studying that needs to be done to be sure which direction is best for our community. Significant growth is happening in portions of our district. We also have a new career and technical education program that we may need to have some facility needs to bring it to fruition. Community members have been and will continue to be a part of the process. Next, I'll invite Kay, Community Relations Director, to come and talk about the ballot language.
Thank you, Anthony. The next few slides will talk about the proposed ballot language. The first option is a recommended version, but we'll share 2 possibilities with you. The first option is called a revoke and replace. It ends the current authorization at 9 years, would start a new 10-year authorization in paid 2023, and would run fiscal years 2024 through 2033. This would essentially be an increase going to the authorized limit or cap. The timing, however, starts a year ahead of schedule. So in essence, we stop what we're currently doing and start fresh. Voters will be presented with a total of 2 questions. If option 1 is a chosen direction, this is what voters would see on their ballot for question 1. After consulting with outside legal counsel, we understand that school districts are very limited on how they can legally present this information. So the language is not able to change with what you see here. As my colleagues have shared, of note is that the figure on this operating question is based on a per pupil breakdown and dollar figures associated with that. So operating levy totals are based on student enrollment. If option 1 is the chosen direction, this is what voters would see on their ballot for question 2. After consulting with our outside legal counsel, we understand that school districts are able to share a description of some kind for capital project questions. The yellow lines that you see here reflect that portion of the question. There we mentioned that the funds will be used for the acquisition and installation of improved instructional technology technology systems, and technology support staffing. Again, as my colleagues have shared, capital projects are based on net tax capacity. So this is why you're seeing percentages as a focal point instead of dollar figures. Option 2 is similar to option 1, but it's considered a renew and increase. This would finish current authorization at 10 years, would start a new 10-year authorization in pay 2024, and would run fiscal years 2025 through 2034. The timing is the main difference between the two options. So we would finish our current 10-year levies as originally planned and then start a new 10-year levy the following year. This would be a year later timeline-wise than option 1. It would still go to the authorized limit or cap at the increased portion of it and be total of 2 questions presented to voters. If option 2 is the chosen direction, this is what voters would see on their ballot for question 1. Again, we are very limited on how we can legally present this, so the language is not able to change with what you see here. This is what voters would see on their ballot for question 2. If option 2 is the chosen direction, legally, we are able to share a description of some kind for capital project questions. That isn't currently shared in this version, but would be added if this is the chosen direction. It can be the same or similar to what we see in option 1's question 2. Again, timing is the main difference between the two options. Option 1 would start in 23-24, option 2 in 24-25. Both would go to the cap. This would generate $8.1 million more than our current authorization for 23-24 on our operating levy, and an additional $2.3 million for our capital projects levy on technology for 23-24. Knowing that there is likely a facilities bond in the future, going to option 1 would spread the tax impact of building a better future out a bit more. Otherwise, both would be in the same school year. There would also not be as a dramatic increase with the facilities bond coming shortly thereafter. And last but not least, our district would avoid cutting approximately $3 million in 23-24 and potentially larger needed cuts in the years following. Historically, the last 2 times in our election history that community members saw a need were both revoke and replace ballot questions like option 1. These were in the 2013 and 2007 elections. At this time, administration is recommending option 1. Shelby McQuay from Ellers is going to explain our tax impact chart on the next slide here.
Thanks, Kay. This estimated tax impact is what the voters would see on some sample properties. Both questions are intended to be on the same tax impact table for simplicity, showing the total. You're fortunate because of your size and scope of your tax base that the tax impact of the 2 questions is within the scope presented in your residential survey. Both are below at $9 on an average home. That green box is showing the average home of $250,000. That average impact of $9 for both questions is within the scope on that residential survey. Once the decision is made by the board to move ahead with an election, then Ellers will provide you and the communications team with a tax impact website. So in addition to being able to see just these sample properties on this tax impact form, they'll be able to go in and punch in their exact property value and then get what they'll be paying in taxes payable, beginning in taxes payable 2023. So it's a nice personalized tool so that your homeowners can have that kind of instant understanding of how this will impact them going forward. In addition to just having that website, then they'll also, as part of the election documents, be sent home with, as part of the notice for their voting, the tax impact will also be included in that notice. So they'll see it in a number of places. I guess I want to point out to you and highlight for the board that we work with quite quite a few school districts, and more are starting their communication process very early for these types of referendums and getting the word out. So that's what you're doing now. I commend you for looking at this really early, and I'll pass it back to Kay here if there aren't any questions, or maybe we can save them to the end. I think she's going to talk a little more about that informational campaign.
Thank you, Shelby. If the board decides to move forward with the referendum this fall, the communication or informational campaign surrounding it will start kicking into gear this spring. This is needed because of the very busy election season. Our plan is to share more details on this tentatively at April's work session, and thus far the goals are to ensure an informed voting public by providing timely, relevant, and easily accessible information, to equip parents, staff, and other key stakeholders to be trusted ambassadors of referendum information to other voters, to minimize surprised voters by starting to share information before the noisy fall election season, to encourage participation in the election by parents, staff, and key district stakeholders, to minimize misinformation and immediately correct and clarify any, to comply with all legal requirements of holding and communicating about a referendum, and to build pride in and support for the district students and staff. Superintendent McIntyre is going to talk about next steps now.
Yeah, so board members, this is the first of a few engagements on this topic, and we tried to give you a pretty comprehensive look and perspective at the pieces to this. And I want to stress that a lot of planning and work's brought us to this point. Thank you, Shelby, for coming and waiting a couple hours to be able to speak. So board members, again, you're not deciding today. But please let us know the information you'd like to have or the questions you have over the next, coming days and weeks. Our referendum team is available to help walk you through the process. And, again, as I said at the beginning, this is one of the larger decisions you'll be making together for our community. Our next steps are highlighted on this slide, and just a few key pieces here. So tentatively, at the next board meeting on March 22nd, we'll review information and head into a possible vote for you to give us that direction. And the benefit of that is to get out in the springtime, as covered here, to begin to tell our story. Tentatively at the April 12th work session, should you set that direction, then we can come back with a more detailed informational campaign that we've already begun to build out. The facility planning portion of the Building a Better Future will have an update at our May meeting, and then in July and August, that small tweak to the dollar figures that might be needed to the operating cap. We would have that for you once the Minnesota Department of Education has that, which we expect to have in July. So that was a lot of ground to cover. Thanks for hanging in there with us on kind of the key pieces to this. And with that, Chair Dawson Walton, I'll turn it back to you for discussion.
All right, does anybody have any comments or questions?
Yes, quick question. Hopefully an easy one. I was just wondering, this is my first time going through this. As a board member, just wondering what the ongoing role of, was it fiscal and, well, TPAC? TTAC, yeah.
I can't speak specifically to fiscal. I can only assume that they're going to continue conversations around referendum. For DTAC, which I facilitate, we've had conversations about the referendum at every one of our meetings this year about how the current levy is being used, leading into what a potential renewal would be, knowing that we're coming up to the 9-year cycle. We will continue to engage with the DTAC committee as we progress through the referendum, and how we're going to move forward with those dollars and allocate those dollars and build out plans around what those dollars would be in more detail.
And what's the current makeup of the committee?
It's open to everyone, so it is an open committee to staff, community members, parents, guardians, students. We haven't had a student on yet, but we're working to try and wrap that in. So we are working to broaden the base of who's in there. Right now, it's probably made up of a majority of staff, all the way from teachers and paraprofessionals up to some district leaders. And then we do have a good handful of parent community representatives on that committee as well.
Thank you. And then just one more question. It doesn't necessarily need to be answered today. Just wondering, how external economic factors could potentially jeopardize our success in this. So thinking about, you know, the increase in gas prices and sort of all of those things, how could that impact this, and has that come into play in the past?
Yeah, and if you remember, when we saw the residential survey last month, we talked about a brush fire survey in the early fall, just to try to, again, take the litmus of what are those factors that we maybe can't even foresee right now. About, you know, a couple months, Kay, if I remember what Peter said, a couple months ahead of that election, just to try to identify, is there something new that's impacting the possible support for the referendum? So anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that will be early fall, definitely, that we'll do that brush fire survey. We'll want to make sure at that time that we could make some potential tweaks. So are our messages being heard? Or are they not? Are there different places that we need to reach out to? So we'll have we should be on a good path already with our information that we have, but we'll be able to make sure at that point. There is a possibility of just the unknown, definitely, for sure, but we're going to do our best. We've done quite a bit of research thus far. We have a pretty good plan set up thus far, so making sure that we can do everything ahead of time. I know, like, specifically with, I think it's Brooklyn Park and Maple Grove both have questions too on the ballot, so I'm actually meeting with both of those communities to find out a little bit more about that, so that our messaging isn't in line, so that we're not kind of stepping on each other's toes, so to speak. So we're doing all that we can, you know, thinking about the environment that we're in as a whole, to make sure that we're moving forward and people are informed with our questions.
Kind of along those same lines, I've received questions about, really more expressions of frustration with how the district handled the COVID-19 pandemic, or just the fact that we were in it and people didn't like their kids being in distance learning, or just different concerns that people had. And then as a result, they have kind of a bad taste in their mouth and they don't want to support these things. Can you just talk about why it's important that we continue to move down this path, and why we're putting this on the ballot, and what kind of the really big pieces that would directly impact student learning?
Well, if we don't renew the almost $36 million that'll be by then, and then the additional nearly $10 million, that's about 12 to 14% of our overall budget. So that's well over 100 staff, probably more than that with the tech levy. Be some serious reductions that would come our way without not only not being able to continue with the supports we've put in place the last couple of years, but seeing some significant reductions if that doesn't renew, at least. And we think we should go to the cap and capture those additional funds to be able to continue the supports we've identified and put in place around the areas we've talked about. I think we all kind of share some of that sentiment. It's been a hard 2 years, right? And although through that crisis, boy, we sure learn a lot, and I think we've learned a lot about what we need to be investing in to make sure our scholars have what they need, academically, social, emotionally. So I think we're all feeling some sense of it was tough, and I can understand that frustration. But so then how do we set our course forward for the next 10 years and invest in the kinds of things we know that we want to do to achieve our mission and vision that you've laid out for us?
So I think you touched on a really important piece that I just want to highlight, was that you just said that would be about 100 staff members.
Or more.
We currently employ about 400 staff members.
Well, we have over 32.
Teachers, sorry.
Yeah,
Teachers.
we have about 1,600 teachers.
Yeah.
And then 3,200 employees, but it's significant.
Yeah, that's a really significant piece. I mean, I just had a conversation the other day where somebody was wanting to know about the achievement integration budget, and concerned about, what's all this salaries and benefits, and explaining that we're a really people-centered business. Our customers are people, and our services are delivered by people.
Yeah,
and so
these,
that's so important.
Yeah, it's a great point. And these funds also help us support, the contract settlements that we help, negotiate with all of our employee groups, right? To be able to really, you've seen the staff shortages, you've seen the open positions we have, the competition for workers. So these funds are another key factor in being able to, provide a meaningful wage for our staff, regardless of the department they're in, because we have double-digit labor groups that we work with. So just making sure that we can pay a fair wage moving into the near future of the next 10 years, this is a key piece to be able to at least position us to do that, right? So thank you for
I think
comments.
to add on to Corey with the tech levy specifically, and I know I've spoke with many of you around this and others that have asked questions, oftentimes there's a misconception that, a tech levy going away means there's just not one-to-one devices. Well, 40% of the tech levy is the technology staff that support the whole district, which means if the tech levy goes away, we can't cut all those staff, so those staff move into the general fund, which has a domino effect back into the classroom. So I look at it as a whole cut if we lose technology levy or operating levy, which has a lot of staff in that component as well.
Thank you.
And I might provide an observation to your question, which is the fact that we did have these resources in place, the technology in place, carried us through those unforeseen circumstances. So I always, during my time on the board, have observed the very careful and thoughtful financial planning, the transparency that's brought forward. I think our district has just such a strong internal and external reputation for financials that we're not waiting until there's a problem. We're doing the right thing to have the proper foundation so that when the storms come, that we are well positioned. And that's, I think, really a differentiating factor relative to other school districts. So it's been very helpful to see that spelled out today too, and just the nuts and bolts of what this really is going to be used for, and the additional information on what will happen if we don't advance this forward.
And that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought it up. That's really a big driver behind the revoke and replace. So by doing it now, we can spread out that impact and actually avoid some reductions by waiting a year for the renewal, by getting out in front of it a year ahead of time, and just starting the new 10-year cycle now it benefits us financially as well.
So I wanted to ask a little bit more questions about the impact on families or taxpayers. So if I can assume correctly, if you're a renter, you're not going to see an increase in your rent, right?
Ask Shelby lots of questions. She's been waiting all night. So.
Yeah, so no, renters do not pay property taxes in the same way. So
Right.
they do it through their rent each month. And so if a property owner who owns an apartment building wants to pass that along, then there's a formula on which they can attribute a certain percentage of their property taxes and pass that along. But no, renters will not see that impact. So when we show apartments on here, that is to apartment owners, not.
And then what percentage of our voters are homeowners?
We don't have that information. I don't know if Maurice Leatherman shared
We don't have
that.
We don't have the crosstabs quite yet, but that might be one of the.
Okay.
We will be able to
Yeah.
get that.
Well, and we will be?
I think so.
Okay. Well, because I just wanted to contextualize this, because you've set the average at $250,000 for a home. Is that still the average price for a home in our district area, even with housing prices going up?
Yeah, I think we pulled some pretty recent information on that, and Hennepin County has some good data on that. And I think I would call it maybe the median instead of the average is probably more representative of what that is. And I believe, let's see, I'm trying to think when the 2022 assessment comes out, but I think that's a little bit later in this process.
You know, I think if our polls show that $7 is a good number, then it would be really interesting to know how many of our taxpayers or homeowners would be impacted at $7 or under, or $7 or over, rather than having residents look. You know, so you could have a metric like most taxpayers will only be paying $7.
Yeah, and I think
You know what I'm just kind of framing it that way, because this, not everybody's gonna connect with this, but it still affects everybody.
Yeah, we can work with Kate to kind of disaggregate maybe more of the Hennepin County data to figure out what that really looks like, and maybe by individual cities as well within your district. I guess I would say overall, the referendum market value is distributed about 64% to residential homesteads, and that's, that's total market value, so you're not getting a real great count there, compared to about 15% in what's called other residential, which is, those are voters, but they're not the, they're probably renters. And then about 20% is made up of commercial properties.
And how does that work in terms of messaging for people that own commercial property and are looking at a tax increase? Is that something that they're not gonna like? Or are we able to make the case that it's good to value our schools?
We would stick to the messaging that we have, but it's really important that we reach out to all the groups that we can possibly do that. And if there's a group or even an organization that we should be reaching out to, we can definitely do that to make sure that they're aware of what we're trying to achieve.
We were just at the Realtors Forum for Brooklyn Park. It was the 30th annual, by the way, last week. And it just was a reminder to Kay and I when we were there talking with the realtors, we were really working hard to make sure they have accurate information as they help people move in or within our district, where they live and what the kinds of homes they want and those kinds of things. The concept with the value of our school district, we saw that in our results as well. And a lot of times that movement is due to work, right? Due to job changes or stability, right? Those kinds of things. So I think it all does tie together. I think we have a commitment through our informational campaign to make sure we help share the why with our business owners in addition to our homeowners.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for your, I didn't mean to drill down that deep. It just seems like $7 or $9 is a great message, but it doesn't impact everybody at the same way.
I actually have a clarifying question on that. It sounded to me like what you're saying is typically a renter probably wouldn't see that, but they could if their landlord chooses to increase their rent. Is that kind of what you were getting at by passing on that?
Yeah, there's
increase?
a form that each rental landlord will have to fill out to determine how much of the property taxes can be passed along. So, I think I want to say it's like a 17% factor.
So it wouldn't even necessarily be the whole tax burden that they're receiving.
And they don't have to, there's nothing in statute requiring them to pass along, and they could completely absorb the tax impact. They don't need to pass along any of it.
And are business owners who are not residents eligible to vote on the levies?
Nope, you have to be a resident of the district in order to vote.
And a business owner for that to be a factor, right? Okay, thank you.
And they're likely looking at the school tax in relation to all the other taxes, that we talk about when they're determining their rent amount, when they want to do rent increases or not.
Yeah, with 3 ballot questions, I just would be careful about what we predict on that message for renters. I would be cautious to say they won't feel something if 3 ballot questions pass. But I do think it's even, and we see this in the city too, right? When cities are evaluating taxes, that it's always best, like you're saying, to have that continued message and engagement with those in your community who may not be voters, but certainly are impacted and make choices about their activity in your community. So I appreciate that clarity.
Okay, anyone else? All right, well, this is great information. I agree. I mean, I think it really gets down to the nuts and bolts of the why. I think that's the most important piece because we've had quite a couple of years. So we're going to say something else, Chris?
You just, as questions come to top of mind, please send those to me or to Kay and John. We want to make sure you have all the information that you feel like you need. And if you're like me, you're going to think of them on the drive home and, and on the, so please jot them down, write them down, send them to us so we can make sure we have that for you.
Yes, and thank you to all of you for your thoughtful and careful planning.
Okay. Thank you, Shelby, for joining us tonight. I appreciate you coming.
Shelby.
Yeah. All right, board members, our last agenda item is just a quick review of our upcoming board calendar. And as I mentioned earlier, right now, tentatively anyway, we have at our regular meeting coming up the potential proposed resolution for you. So depending on the feedback from board members, we'll finalize that potential proposed resolution so that it can set the question language for us moving forward, and then begin to work on that informational campaign. So that will that will come back at the work session under that scenario in April, along with, right now we are scheduled tentatively at least to have the district class size update. That's a Metro EXU study that we got here just in the last week or so, and we're working on analyzing. Then Anthony and his team will have the DL4A update, and then an update for you on 279 online. Since that's still such a new program, we want to make sure we're giving you a kind of update on how that's going. Another big piece in April is the DPAC recommendations. And I know Heather and Jackie, you've been a part of that work. Thank you very much. And I know how seriously that committee takes that work, and it's very impressive. And I remember last year, Director Brooks, you were curious about how do we follow up on the last set of recommendations. So I've asked the team to be able to speak to that. That was a really good question a year ago already almost, but so know that they're preparing for that as well. And just as a placeholder here on the calendar, you'll notice every meeting we have that spot holding that space for negotiation strategies meetings for as long as we're going to need those that are just on the calendar. And then the other big piece I'll point out here is as we look towards May, that building a better future piece that we talked so much about tonight, bringing that back, looking at those 8 study groups and kind of where the work is now and where we are still needing to go. As you know, the facility audit work has been happening, and we'll have kind of more information for you on the building a better future process. I think tonight was really important to be really clear about the fact that, maybe an ideal world, it'd be nice to have some of those things fall in the same year. I don't know if we'd love 2 election years in a row having to go out, but I think it's really important for the reasons we've talked about tonight to do that operating and tech levy now and take the time we needed. The reason that wasn't a year further out was really learning what the pandemic did to the housing market, our enrollment, our budget, all those variables that we needed and still need that time to tighten up so that we can come to you with a strong recommendation. So right now, those are the key pieces I would identify on the calendar. And then we're also, as we talked about last meeting, I'm trying to find the right spot here for an update on our Indian education programming. And we also like to, near the end of the year, just talk about supporting student behavior as well. So that's another thing. We're trying to make sure we have our survey results. That helps tell that story, and potentially getting closer to the end of the year so we can have more comprehensive data for the whole school year instead of kind of a partial data set. So we're kind of working, our teams are talking about that and trying to plan when that can best fall on the meeting calendar here for you. So know that those things are in the works as well. I know those are things you've been interested in. So with that in mind, I know you're good. I try to give you an update on this every week, so I'm sorry it's one more document that you get because it changes every week too, but it does give you a sense to, and I'm going to begin building next year's soon, because some of these are just, we know certain things land on certain months and we can already have that in place. So for a while you might get to this year's and next year's as we begin to make that transition into the following school year. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to you, Chair Dawson Walton. And
I think just the only thing I wanted to add is that we have the listening session. Also.
Correct. Oh, thank you for saying that. I would recommend we start thinking about doing those in person now that it's healthier and safer to do that. I think it's a more valuable experience for everyone. So we could start thinking about doing those listening sessions in person, and then as things progress, I'm anxious to get our work sessions more either here in the middle of the room or in the other space, more of a work session style thing. But we've been really thoughtful and careful about making this transition too. And so that's coming as well, right? So that's my recommendation is we can start to transition those listening sessions to in-person.
Sounds good.
And I know you made a commitment to do those each month till the end of the year, so.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I also wanted to say happy International Women's Day to my colleagues, Heather and Jackie and Tanya and Tamara. With that, this session is adjourned at 8:46 p.m.
On that American Indian? I haven't been invited to the meeting yet.
An adjournment early.
I know, this is
Well,
crazy.
you're the backup, right?
I thought I was the lead.
earlier
and
than
he was the
that.
backup.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Especially for a
I
work
could be
session.
wrong, but
Yeah,
Thomas
even if
was-
it's just a few
Let me
minutes,
go
like,
back and
I think
look at
that's
that.
kind of a
Just
big
'cause
deal.
there's-
It's facilitation and.
I'm gonna mess up. this.
Kay obviously went through her presentation super